Hey there, tonight we're diving into the bustling world of Roman artisans hustling through the forum's chaos. What you're about to discover is how they transformed everyday survival into an art form, quite literally, with a touch of humor that even the emperors couldn't resist. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. So there you are, elbow to elbow with about 150,000 other sweaty souls in the Roman Forum. Here's your morning routine. Dodge a donkey, sidestep a toga-clad senator, and try not to trip over a stray amphora. Welcome to the ancient world's equivalent of a bustling metropolis, where the air is thick with the scent of olive oil, and the cacophony of bartering voices competes with the occasional shout of a street performer trying to earn his daily bread by juggling flaming torches. It's organized chaos, but for the Roman artisan it's home. And trust me, the competition here makes Black Friday look like a lazy Sunday brunch. The Forum wasn't just a place. It was the heartbeat of Rome. You had your temples, your basilicas, and your shops all crammed into a space that would make a New York City grid seem spacious. As an artisan, you had to claim your slice of this imperial pie. Setting up shop was an art form in itself. You'd rise at the crack of dawn, or maybe even before that if you had a particularly prime spot to secure. And you needed to, because the early bird got the sesterces, or at least the chance to cut through the noise of 1,000 other vendors hawking their wares. The logistics were as daunting as a Caesar's ego. Imagine dragging all your tools and goods through the narrow streets of Rome, where every corner might greet you with a chariot race or a philosophical debate that could derail your morning plans. The Forum was no place for the faint-hearted. You needed a strategy, a plan to outsmart the guy selling the same pottery or sandals 2 stalls down. Maybe you'd offer a deal, like 2 candlesticks for the price of 1, or throw in a free cup with every purchase. Pricing strategies were your secret weapon. A denarius here, a sestrius there, and suddenly you're the talk of the taberna. In the Roman Forum, artisans weren't just sellers. They were lifelines of daily life. From the blacksmith pounding away at his anvil, creating the tools and weapons that kept Roman society ticking, to the potter shaping clay into vessels that would store everything from wine to olive oil. Every artisan contributed to the grand machine that was Rome. Without them, the city might have ground to a halt, or at least suffered a severe shortage of mosaic tiles. But let's not romanticize it too much. Working in the Forum was no idyllic scene from a marble frieze. The reality, it was noisy, dirty, and could be downright dangerous. Thieves lurked in every shadow, ready to nab a purse or a prized piece of craftsmanship. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of a market inspector who might decide it was time for you to pay an unexpected fee to keep your stall operational. Yes, corruption was alive and well, even back then. The artisans were masters of adaptation, constantly changing their tactics to stay ahead. Maybe today it was all about textiles, but tomorrow, who knows? The demand could shift like the tides of the Tiber. Being an artisan meant having a finger on the pulse of Roman tastes, which could pivot faster than you can say, carpe diem. And in a city where fashion and status were everything, keeping up with the latest trends was essential. Miss a beat, and you might find yourself as out of date as a plebeian tunic in a patrician's closet. Artisans also played a crucial role in the social fabric of Rome. They were the conduits through which news and gossip flowed. What's the latest scandal from the Senate? Who's the newest gladiator sensation? The Forum was not just a marketplace. It was the ancient equivalent of social media, with artisans as the influencers of their day. They knew who was who and what was what, and they weren't afraid to share it with their patrons, maybe over a discounted goblet if you were lucky. Yet, despite the glamour of it all, the life of an artisan was no easy path. It was a constant hustle, a daily grind that required grit and tenacity. The Forum was a jungle, and only the most cunning survived. But for those who did, the rewards could be substantial. A successful day in the Forum could mean the difference between a humble dinner of bread and water or a feast fit for a minor deity, complete with garum sauce. In a world where the stakes were as high as the columns that lined the Forum, artisans were the unsung heroes, the backbone of an empire that stretched from Britannia to Egypt. They might not have worn laurel crowns or commanded legions, but without their skill and ingenuity, Rome might have been just another footnote in the annals of history. And so, as you navigate the bustling chaos of the Forum, remember this. The artisans of Rome weren't just surviving. They were thriving in the heart of an empire that never slept. So as the dust settles on the Forum, and you mentally prepare for yet another day in the Roman hustle, let's dive into the economic roller coaster that artisans faced, a ride wilder than a chariot race on the Circus Maximus track. It all starts with grain prices, a real Achilles heel of ancient Rome's economic machine. Picture this. One day you're buying wheat at a decent rate. The next it skyrocketed because some governor in Egypt decided to play politics with grain shipments. Talk about a recipe for financial heartburn. You see, grain wasn't just food. It was the bedrock of Roman commerce, influencing everything from bread prices to the mood of the masses. When grain prices spiked, everyone felt it, from the patrician with his lavish feasts to the artisan scraping by on a handful of denarii. Here's the kicker. The government had a grain dole to keep the populace from revolting. But if you were an artisan, you were often too well off to qualify, yet too poor to comfortably navigate the price swings. A real Goldilocks zone of economic misery. Now, let's talk patrons. The high-rolling, toga-wearing big shots who could make or break an artisan's career faster than you can say, Veni, Vidi, Vici. These patrons were the venture capitalists of the ancient world, investing in talent and expecting a solid return on their sesterces. But they were as fickle as the Tiber in flood season. One moment they're commissioning a grand mosaic for their latest villa, and the next they've moved on to someone who promises to make even shinier tiles. Keeping a patron happy was like balancing a lyre on a tightrope. A single misstep could send your fortunes tumbling. Speaking of fortunes, let's not forget the cost of materials. Bronze, marble, pigments, all the good stuff artisans needed came with price tags that could induce a Roman fainting spell. Marble, for instance, could cost as much as 50 denarii per cubic foot, depending on quality. That's about the same price as a modest slave. And don't even get started on the price fluctuations of exotic pigments like Tyrian purple. Talk about a hue with a price as royal as its color. But wait, there's a silver lining, or rather, a collegium-shaped one, into the trade guilds, or collegia, the ancient equivalent of a workers' union, providing a semblance of stability in a world where stability was as rare as a Roman who didn't enjoy a good feast. These collegia offered collective bargaining power and a sense of community. They could negotiate better prices for materials, share tools, and even pool resources for that big contract from a senator who wanted a new fountain or fresco. It was a bit like having a safety net, but one that occasionally had holes big enough to let through the odd financial catastrophe. And then there were the artisans' survival tactics. Oh, the creativity. Some artisans would band together, forming small cooperatives to share the burden of materials and labor costs. Others would diversify their skills, becoming jacks of all trades just to keep the sestertii rolling in. Imagine a blacksmith who also dabbles in pottery, or a weaver who moonlights as a leather worker. In a market as unpredictable as the Roman Forum, adaptability wasn't just an asset, it was a necessity. Let's not forget the bartering. When coin was scarce, sometimes a pair of sandals could be traded for a new set of tools or a ceramic jug for a bushel of grain. This was the original sharing economy, long before apps and the internet turned it into a billion-dollar industry. It was a system born out of necessity, a way to keep the wheels turning when cash flow was tighter than a senator's toga at a banquet. But all the clever strategies in the world couldn't completely insulate artisans from the whims of the economy or the caprices of their patrons. The truth was, surviving in the Forum required a mix of skill, luck, and more than a little bravado. Yet despite the odds, many artisans not only survived, they thrived. They were the craftsmen and women who left their mark on history, their work etched in stone and memory. As you ponder this ancient dance of commerce and creativity, remember that these artisans were more than just cogs in the Roman machine. They were the architects of their own destinies, navigating a world where fortune could turn on a sestertius. They may have battled economic storms and capricious patrons, but their legacy is one of resilience and ingenuity, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dared to dream in the shadow of Rome's mighty forum. And with that, our journey through the bustling heart of ancient commerce continues, as we delve deeper into the lives and strategies of these remarkable craftsmen in the upcoming parts. So, as our journey through the bustling heart of ancient commerce continues, let's dive into the social jungle that was the Roman artisan community. This wasn't just about who could carve the fanciest column or weave the softest toga. It was a vibrant, stratified world where your trade determined your place in the pecking order. First, let's talk about the hierarchy within the artisan ranks. You might think of these craftspeople as a cohesive group, all elbowing for space in the forum, but reality paints a different picture. Some trades had the allure of a midnight chariot race, while others were as glamorous as a mud wrestling contest. Take, for instance, the sculptors and massaists. These folks were the rock stars of the artisan world, the Michelangelos before Michelangelo was a twinkle in the Renaissance's eye. Their work adorned the homes of the wealthy and the walls of the grandest temples, earning them a prestige that a humble cobbler could only dream of. Then you had the blacksmiths, the backbone of practicality, hammering out everything from tools to the swords that would win empires. They were respected, sure, but more in the way you respect a reliable pair of sandals rather than a pair of gilded gladiator boots. Their work was essential, which meant they were indispensable, like Wi-Fi at a tech conference. Now, contrast that with the leatherworkers or tailors. These artisans were as low on the social ladder as a Roman snail's belly. Sure, everyone needed a good pair of shoes or a tunic that wouldn't fall apart in the rain, but these weren't trades that got you noticed by the high rollers of Roman society. In the great feast of Roman life, they were the breadsticks, necessary but far from exciting. And what about the potters? Ah, the potters. With their hands constantly in clay, they were like the potluck guests who brought the most reliable dish, not flashy, but everyone needed their wares. They churned out amphorae by the dozen, each one ready to be filled with olive oil or wine, the ancient world's ambrosia. But in terms of prestige, let's just say they weren't exactly getting front-row seats at the gladiator games. Speaking of which, let's take a cue from Pliny the Elder, our ancient gossip columnist with a penchant for natural history. Pliny's writings give us a glimpse into how the Romans themselves viewed these artisans. He often waxed lyrical about the wonders of Roman ingenuity, but don't be fooled. Pliny had a tendency to romanticize, painting a picture of artisans as noble creators shaping the empire with their bare hands. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find artisans were more like the unsung heroes of a sitcom, constantly hustling, often overlooked, and crucial to the plot. Pliny, in his Natural History, might have praised the artistry of a well-crafted statue or the precision of a beautifully laid mosaic, but he conveniently glossed over the less glamorous aspects, like the fact that many artisans worked in cramped workshops, inhaling dust and fumes day in and day out, or that a simple miscalculation could turn a week's worth of work into a pile of rubble. The reality was less about the beauty of creation and more about the stress of meeting deadlines and keeping patrons happy. And speaking of patrons, let's not forget how they fit into this social puzzle. These patrons were the puppet masters pulling the strings, and an artisan's relationship with them was as delicate as a politician's promise. A good patron could elevate an artisan's status faster than you can say Senerus Populusque Romanus, but a fickle one could leave them scrambling for scraps in the forum's shadow. Beyond the patrons, artisans had to navigate the ever-shifting tides of public opinion. Romans were nothing if not fashion-conscious, and trends could change as quickly as a Roman road was paved. One day, everyone wanted marble busts of their ancestors. The next, it was all about intricate frescoes depicting epic mythological scenes. Keeping up with these trends was like riding a roller coaster without a safety bar, exhilarating but potentially disastrous. And let's not forget the collegia, those artisan guilds that were part support group, part social club. They provided a semblance of order, helping artisans band together, negotiate better terms, and when necessary, stand united against the whims of a capricious market. But they were also a hotbed of intrigue, where alliances were forged and rivalries simmered. Getting on the wrong side of a guild leader could be as perilous as crossing a Roman senator on a bad day. In this world, reputation was everything, and it could be as fragile as a piece of blown glass. A single mistake, a poorly made product, or a delayed delivery could spell disaster. Artisans relied on word of mouth, the ancient version of Yelp reviews, to secure future work. A bad review from a disgruntled patrician could spread through the forum faster than a charioteer on race day. Yet, despite the challenges, the Roman artisan community was a microcosm of resilience. They were the dreamers who dared to carve a name for themselves in the stone of history. They were the innovators who juggled the demands of art, commerce, and survival with the deftness of a street performer. And while the marble friezes and grand mosaics might have captured the glory of Rome, it was the hands of these artisans that brought them to life. So, as we continue to unravel the layers of this ancient world, let's keep our eyes on the artisans. They might not have wielded power like the senators or commanded armies like the generals, but their legacy is etched in every corner of Rome. With each step through the forum, remember that beneath the grandeur and the glory, it was the artisans, those unsung craftsmen and craftswomen, who truly shaped the empire. Stay tuned, because we've only just begun to explore the labyrinthine world of these remarkable creators. As we wade deeper into the Roman artisans' world, let's switch gears to the political chessboard, where these craftsmen were often the pawns. You see, Roman politicians had a knack for using artisans like a Swiss army knife, versatile and handy in a pinch. From the grand aqueducts that quenched Rome's thirst to those towering triumphal arches that screamed, "Look how awesome we are." Artisans were the unsung heroes, turning political promises into tangible reality. Consider the aqueducts, those marvels of engineering that transported water across the empire like a liquid conveyor belt. Behind every arch and channel were skilled stonemasons and laborers, their fingers calloused from shaping the very blocks that held the empire's thirst at bay. But here's the rub. These projects were as much about politics as they were about public service. A savvy politician could win the hearts and votes of the plebeian masses by commissioning a new aqueduct. It was like offering free Wi-Fi in a modern city, an instant popularity boost. And then there were the forums and basilicas, those grand public buildings that served as the backdrop for political posturing and power plays. The artisans constructing these structures were unwitting accomplices in a game of one-upmanship among Rome's elite. The bigger and more opulent the building, the greater the political clout. Julius Caesar, ever the showman, was a master of this tactic. He famously funded the Forum Julium out of his own pocket. Well, technically out of Rome's coffers. But let's not split hairs. This move wasn't just about providing a public space. It was Caesar's way of cementing his legacy, quite literally in stone. Speaking of Julius Caesar, let's talk about how his reforms stirred the pot in the artisan community. His reign was a whirlwind of change, and for artisans, it brought both opportunities and headaches. On one hand, Caesar's ambitious building projects meant work aplenty. On the other, his centralization of power shifted the economic landscape dramatically. Artisans who once relied on the patronage of local elites now found themselves at the mercy of imperial favor. It was like suddenly having to impress the CEO instead of your department manager. Caesar's reforms also included measures to curb corruption, particularly among the market inspectors, who had a reputation for being as slippery as a Roman eel. In theory, this was great news for artisans, who were often victims of these inspectors' fees. In practice, however, it meant navigating a bureaucracy that was as labyrinthine as the Minotaur's maze. And let's not forget the impact of Rome's ever-changing political alliances and conflicts. Wars required weapons, armor, and supplies, creating a boom for blacksmiths and leatherworkers. However, peace, or the Roman version of it, which was more like a temporary pause, could lead to a sudden drop in demand. The economy swayed like a drunken reveler at a bacchanalia, and artisans needed to be as nimble as a charioteer to avoid being trampled in the chaos. Amidst all this, the artisans had to navigate the fickle waters of Roman politics with the precision of an acrobat. Take the example of the Collegium Fabrum, a guild of builders and construction workers. They often found themselves caught between their loyalty to the state and their need to secure private commissions. When political winds shifted, these artisans had to be ready to pivot or risk sinking faster than a lead amphora in the Tiber. The political climate also influenced the types of projects that were in demand. During times of political unrest, there was a surge in commissions for statues and monuments glorifying Rome and its leaders. It was the ancient equivalent of a PR campaign, with marble and bronze as the mediums. Artisans had to be adept not only at their craft, but also at reading the political tea leaves, anticipating which projects would be the next big thing. Yet, as much as they were pawns in the political game, artisans were also players in their own right. They were the ones who gave form to the political ambitions of Rome's leaders, their work shaping the very skyline of the city. Each building, statue, and fresco was a testament to their skill and resilience, a reminder that even in the shadow of political titans, it was the craftsmen who left a tangible mark on history. So, while politicians plotted and schemed, it was the artisans who built the foundations of those dreams. They turned visions into reality, crafting the world of Caesar and Cicero, leaving behind a legacy as enduring as the stones they shaped. Their lives were a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability, proving that even in a world dominated by political power, the artisan spirit was indomitable. And as we prepare to dive into the next chapter of this historical saga, let's keep our eyes on these craftsmen who, amidst the chaos, carved out a piece of eternity. As we prepare to dive into the next chapter of this historical saga, let's keep our eyes on these craftsmen who, amidst the chaos, carved out a piece of eternity. Now, let's take a step back and ponder how these Roman artisans, despite their daily grind in the Forum's frenzy, left an indelible mark on the world that echoes through the corridors of history even today. First off, let's obliterate the myth that Roman artisans lived glamorous lives akin to the stars of a Roman amphitheater. The reality, their existence was less a series of triumphs and more a game of survival, where the stakes were higher than the Colosseum on a sunny day. Sure, they crafted exquisite mosaics and statues that would make even the most hardened senator shed a tear, but their daily life was a far cry from luxurious. Picture this, a cramped workshop, more dust than daylight, and the constant clamor of haggling voices. Glamorous, more like a labor-intensive episode of Roman Survivor. The allure of the artisan's life was more a story of grit than glory. They had to be part economist, part artist, and part diplomat, juggling the fluctuating economy with the finesse of a seasoned juggler handling flaming torches. Remember, these artisans didn't just make things, they made things happen. They were the original multitaskers, adapting to demand with the agility of a cat on a hot tin roof. If Roman fashion suddenly dictated a craze for Corinthian columns instead of Doric, you can bet these artisans were already chiseling away at their limestone blocks, ready to meet the trend before it became yesterday's news. Their contributions to modern craftsmanship are as deep as a Roman aqueduct and twice as enduring. The techniques they perfected, like the use of concrete, the invention of the Roman arch, and the development of intricate frescoes, laid the groundwork for architectural marvels that still inspire awe today. Without these innovations, modern architecture might have missed out on some of its most sophisticated tricks. The Pantheon, with its majestic dome, is a testament to a civilization that knew how to push the boundaries of engineering with nothing but a plumb line and sheer determination. But let's not forget their resilience, a theme as central to Roman artisans as the Forum itself. They knew how to pivot faster than a politician at a Senate hearing. When grain prices spiked or a patron decided to take their business elsewhere, these artisans didn't just roll over and accept their fate. No, they hustled, they haggled, and they diversified. It wasn't unusual for a blacksmith to dabble in pottery or a sculptor to try his hand at painting. Talk about career agility. Their ability to adapt was an art form in itself, a lesson that modern entrepreneurs could take a page from. Now, considering their legacy, it's crucial to debunk another myth, that these artisans were simply tools of the Roman elite, bending to every whim of their patrician patrons. While it's true that they often worked under the patronage of Rome's wealthiest, they were far from mere puppets. These craftsmen held the power of choice in their hands, literally. A well-crafted piece could elevate an artisan's status, earning them a reputation that even the most opulent patron couldn't ignore. In a world dominated by power and politics, these artisans wielded their own unique influence, shaping not just stone and metal, but the very culture of Rome. Speaking of culture, remember that artisans were also cultural curators. Their work's a reflection of Rome's ever-shifting societal norms and values. They were the ones who immortalized Rome's greatest victories and darkest defeats, capturing the essence of an empire in every chisel stroke and brush sweep. Their mosaics and frescoes served not just as decoration, but as a historical record, a visual narrative of Rome's grandeur and grit. So, what lessons do these ancient artisans impart to us today? For one, they remind us of the power of adaptability. In a world where demand could shift with the wind, they taught us that survival often depends on our ability to reinvent, to catch the wave before it crashes. They also show us the importance of resilience. Despite the forum's chaos, economic upheavals, and political machinations, these artisans stood their ground, their legacy as enduring as the very stones they carved. Finally, they offer a timeless reminder that true craftsmanship requires more than skill. It demands passion, persistence, and a pinch of audacity. Whether it was a humble potter shaping clay or a master sculptor chiseling marble, these artisans poured their soul into their work, leaving behind a legacy that transcends time and space. So, next time you pass by a grand building or admire a piece of intricate art, tip your hat to the unsung heroes of history, the Roman artisans who, with their tenacity and talent, crafted not just the world of their time, but also laid the foundations for the beauty and innovation we enjoy today. In the grand tapestry of history, their thread is woven inextricably, a testament to the enduring spirit of human creativity. And as you close this chapter on the bustling, chaotic, and ever-resilient world of Roman artisans, remember, in the heart of every masterpiece lies the untold story of those who dared to dream beyond the limits of their world. In an age when indoor plumbing was a luxury and Wi-Fi was a fever dream, Darius the Great decided that if he was going to rule the Achaemenid Empire, he might as well do it in style. Enter Persepolis, the ceremonial capital that put the extra in extravagance. Picture a sprawling complex of palaces, treasury buildings, and grand halls, popping up in 518 BCE like the ancient world's answer to Las Vegas, minus the slot machines, but with a lot more stone reliefs. Darius wasn't just building a city. He was crafting a spectacle, a statement piece. This wasn't merely a hub for administrative paperwork or storing all that sweet tribute from across the empire. No, Persepolis was a symbol, a shiny, stone-clad look what I can do, to friends and foes alike. Think of it as the ultimate power move in the ancient world, a palace complex that screamed, "I have arrived, and I brought a construction crew." Now, if you're imagining Darius standing atop a hill, pointing dramatically at the horizon, while a team of architects scribbles furiously on papyrus, you're not far off. His vision for Persepolis was grander than a Persian rug sale. He wanted a place that could host festivals, showcase the empire's wealth, and intimidate visiting dignitaries, or at least make them envious enough to rethink their life choices. The location he chose, nestled in the Khuzestan province, wasn't exactly a bustling metropolis, making it the ancient equivalent of building Versailles in the middle of a desert. This spot was no accident, though. It was strategically positioned near the heart of the Persian Empire, a logistical choice as much as a symbolic one. It wasn't just about showing off. It was about centralizing power, a place where the empire's vastness could be managed, and where the ceremonial could meet the bureaucratic. But let's not kid ourselves. This was also a bit of a PR stunt. Darius wanted the world to know that he wasn't just any king. He was the asterisk king with a capital K. And let's talk logistics, because building Persepolis wasn't just a matter of snapping one's fingers and watching the magic happen. It required a labor force that could make the pyramids look like a weekend DIY project. Thousands of workers from every corner of the empire were conscripted into service. They toiled away under a sun that must have felt like it was personally offended by their presence. Craftsmen, laborers, artists, they all played a part in this epic game of empire building. You could say that Persepolis was the original multinational corporation, except instead of stock options, there were stone blocks and chisels. The scale of this project was immense. The Apadana, the grand audience hall, was alone big enough to host a small country's worth of guests, which was handy since Darius liked to throw the kind of parties that could make a modern royal wedding look like a backyard BBQ. The hall itself was supported by 72 columns, each standing a towering 20 meters high. And if you're wondering just how much that cost, well, let's just say it wasn't pocket change. The empire's coffers were tapped, and tribute from subject lands helped foot the bill. And then there's the artwork. Ah, the reliefs. These weren't just decorative touches. They were political statements carved into stone. The walls of Persepolis told stories of unity, power, and prosperity, featuring delegations from across the empire bringing gifts to the king. A bit like a parade, but with fewer floats and more gold. These images served a dual purpose, to awe the visitors and remind them of their place in the pecking order. It was ancient propaganda at its finest. But of course, no grand project would be complete without a bit of myth-making. The romantic allure of Persepolis is undeniable. It's easy to get swept up in the tales of opulence and power, but the reality was far more complex. Behind the grandeur was a machine that required constant maintenance, from the workforce that kept the city running to the political maneuvering needed to keep the empire's many parts in harmony. Darius might have been the face of this grand endeavor, but it was the collective effort of thousands that brought his vision to life. Persepolis stands as a testament not just to a king's ambition, but to the empire that made it possible. It was a place where politics, art, and architecture intersected, creating a legacy that has endured for millennia. Yet, for all its splendor, Persepolis was also a reminder of the ephemerality of power. It symbolized the heights of Achaemenid grandeur, but also foreshadowed the impermanence of even the mightiest empires. So, as you drift off to sleep, think about the monumental task that was Persepolis, the grand vision of Darius the Great, and the countless hands that built an empire's dream in the heart of ancient Persia. Because even in history, sometimes the story is as much about the journey as it is about the destination, but enough about Darius's grand vision and the empire's logistical prowess. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty, the architectural genius that turned a patch of Persian dirt into the jewel that is Persepolis. Here's where the real magic happened, though it was less about abracadabra and more about back-breaking labor and artistic wizardry. Imagine those colossal columns soaring into the sky, each one a testament to the empire's sheer determination to defy gravity and common sense. The Apadana alone boasted 72 of these bad boys, each standing a cool 20 meters high. That's taller than a 5-story building, folks, and let's not even start on the decorative flourishes. Each column topped with double-headed bulls or lions, the ancient world's answer to architectural bling. If you ever doubted that ancient Persians knew how to make an entrance, this should settle it. But while the columns might grab your attention first, it's the intricate stone reliefs that hold it. These are not just pretty pictures, but a masterclass in propaganda. Each carving is a story, a snapshot of an empire in its prime. From the procession of dignitaries bearing gifts, gold, textiles, exotic animals, you get a sense of the empire's vast reach. It's like a who's who of the ancient world, all lined up to pay homage to the Persian king. And yes, in case you're wondering, this was a way to flex on the neighbors. Imagine Instagram, but with chisel and stone. The artistic talent behind these works came from across the empire, a multicultural ensemble cast if there ever was one. Craftsmen hailed from Egypt, Greece, Babylon, and even India, each bringing their own flair to the mix. It's a bit like the United Nations of ancient artisans coming together to create something truly epic. This mix of styles and techniques resulted in a unique blend of Persian and foreign influences, making Persepolis not only a capital, but a cultural melting pot. A globalized workforce in 500 BCE, you bet. But don't be fooled by the glamour of it all. Building Persepolis wasn't just a leisurely stroll through the arts and crafts aisle. It was a massive undertaking, requiring a level of coordination that would make a modern-day project manager sweat. Thousands of laborers worked around the clock, likely fueled by little more than bread, onions, and the looming threat of displeasing the king. The site was a beehive of activity, stone being quarried and transported, timber harvested and shaped, bricks baked under the sun. It was a construction circus that left no room for slackers. Now, let's address those legendary Persian parties you've probably heard about. You know, the ones where everyone was supposedly lounging on silk cushions, sipping wine from golden goblets as harpists played in the background. Well, let's just say that not everyone was on the VIP list. Sure, Darius and his entourage might have enjoyed a feast or two, but for the average worker, life was less Great Gatsby and more sweat and toil. The reality was a harsh grind under the relentless sun, with little in the way of creature comforts. That said, when the Persians did throw a party, they didn't hold back. The Nowruz festival, the Persian New Year, was one such occasion where Persepolis transformed into a stage for celebration. Delegations from across the empire would gather, bearing gifts and tributes, a reminder of the king's dominion. This wasn't just about feasting. It was a diplomatic ballet, a chance to showcase unity and power in one dazzling display. But even then, the spectacle was as much for the benefit of visiting dignitaries as it was for the home crowd. Economically speaking, Persepolis was a bit like building a gold-plated yacht in the middle of the desert. Impressive, expensive, and not exactly practical. The resources poured into its construction could have funded a small army, yet it was an investment in image and influence. The empire's coffers were substantial, thanks to a well-oiled machine of taxation and tribute. So, while the price tag of Persepolis was hefty, it was a strategic expenditure, a literal and metaphorical foundation for Persian supremacy. But for all its splendor, Persepolis was not invulnerable. The very elements that made it a symbol of power also foreshadowed its downfall. Those grand stone reliefs didn't just celebrate unity, they also highlighted the empire's Achilles heel, its vastness. Managing such a sprawling realm was a Herculean task, one that required constant vigilance and deft political maneuvering. Even the mightiest columns can only hold up an empire for so long before the cracks start to show. So, as the sun sets over the ruins of Persepolis, casting long shadows on the age-old stones, remember this. It was as much a testament to human ambition as it was a reminder of our limitations. Darius's dream was grand, and the reality was both magnificent and flawed. Yet, in the end, Persepolis remains, a silent witness to the grandeur and demise of an empire that dared to dream big. And isn't that the ultimate legacy? A reminder that even the most monumental achievements are but fleeting moments in the sands of time. Now, let's take a peek behind the curtain of this ancient Las Vegas, where the real magic wasn't in the architecture alone, but in the economic wizardry that made Persepolis rise from the desert like a mirage. Picture the Achaemenid Empire as a vast, humming machine, a juggernaut of trade routes and tribute, each cog finely tuned to keep the emperor's grand dream afloat. You see, Darius wasn't just flexing his artistic muscles. He was orchestrating an economic symphony that would make even modern-day financiers nod in respect. Building Persepolis was akin to undertaking the world's most ostentatious Kickstarter campaign, only with fewer backers and more coercion. It wasn't just about hauling stones and sculpting columns. It was about financing a vision that, quite frankly, could have bankrupted a lesser realm. So, who footed the bill for this desert jewel? The answer, as with most things in empire building, was a mix of taxation, tribute, and some very savvy resource management. First, let's talk numbers, because the cost of constructing Persepolis was no pocket change. Estimates suggest it took about 30 years to build, with thousands of workers laboring tirelessly. The empire's coffers were filled by a sprawling network of satrapies, regional governors who collected taxes and tributes like ancient IRS agents, but with more swords and fewer audits. The Achaemenid Empire stretched from Egypt to India, each region contributing its share, whether in gold, silver, or the ever-useful barley. In a way, Darius had a global economy on his hands, minus the stock market crashes and insider trading. But it wasn't just about collecting shiny objects and stockpiling grain. The empire's economy was a well-oiled machine, driven by extensive trade routes that crisscrossed continents like ancient highways. Picture the Royal Road, a 500-kilometer stretch of infrastructure connecting Sardis in the west to Susa in the east. This was no ordinary dirt path. It was the Silk Road's older, less fashion-conscious cousin, facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and most importantly, revenue. The road cut travel time drastically, allowing messengers to cover the distance in 9 days, a feat that would make FedEx envious. Now, let's switch gears and talk about those trade routes, the veins of this ancient economic beast. The Persians were master networkers long before LinkedIn was a thing. Their empire was a melting pot of cultures and resources, each region contributing its own specialty to the imperial potluck. From the lush gardens of Babylon came textiles and spices, while Egypt supplied grain and gold. India chipped in with precious stones and exotic animals, making Persepolis a showcase of the empire's diversity. This was globalization before it was cool, folks. Of course, Sustaining such an economic engine required more than just clever logistics. It demanded a diplomatic finesse that would put modern politicians to shame. Darius knew that maintaining harmony among diverse cultures was key to keeping the coffers full. His empire was a tapestry of languages, religions, and customs, all woven together under the aegis of Persian rule. The king's policy of tolerance, allowing subject peoples to maintain their traditions, was as much a strategic move as it was a gesture of goodwill. Yet, for all its complexity, this economic powerhouse was not without its vulnerabilities. The sheer scale of the empire meant that any disruption, whether a rebellion in Egypt or a trade hiccup on the royal road, could send ripples throughout the realm. Managing such an unwieldy beast required constant vigilance, a balancing act that would make even the most seasoned tightrope walkers break a sweat. Now, let's not sugarcoat things. The workers who toiled in the shadows of Persepolis' grandeur were not exactly living the Persian dream. While the empire thrived on its wealth and power, the reality for the laborers was far less glamorous. These men and women, drawn from conquered lands, were the unsung heroes of Darius's grand vision. They were the ones chiseling the stones, carving the reliefs, and erecting the columns, all under the sweltering sun and the ever-watchful eyes of overseers. In essence, Persepolis was a monument not just to imperial ambition, but to the human cost of such ambition. It's one thing to marvel at the artistry of the city. It's another to recognize the sweat and toil that made it possible. The empire's prosperity was built on the backs of those who had no choice but to serve, a harsh reality that tempers the romantic allure of ancient grandeur. Yet, for all the myth-busting, there's no denying the seductive appeal of Persepolis. The city was a stage where the empire flaunted its might, a place where the grandeur of Persia was writ large in stone and gold. It was a symbol of unity and power, a testament to the empire's ability to marshal resources and people on an unprecedented scale. The very act of building Persepolis was a declaration to the world. Behold what we can achieve, and tremble at our magnificence. As the story of Persepolis unfolds, it's clear that the city's legacy is as multifaceted as the empire itself. It was a place where art and economics danced a delicate tango, where the dreams of kings were etched into history by the hands of nameless laborers. And while the ruins of Persepolis now stand silent, they continue to speak volumes about the ambitions and contradictions of human civilization. In the grand tapestry of history, Persepolis is a thread that shines brightly, a reminder of what can be accomplished when vision meets determination. But it also warns of the impermanence of power, the fragility of even the mightiest empires. So, as we continue our journey through the echoes of ancient Persia, let's keep our eyes open for the lessons it still has to teach, about ambition, unity, and the costs of empire building. Let's zoom in on Persepolis, where more than just stones were set in place. This city was a living, breathing declaration of Persian power, a place where politics and culture mingled like guests at a royal shindig. On one hand, it was the ultimate vanity project, a stone-clad self-portrait of the empire. On the other, it was a mastermind's chessboard, where each piece, be it a structure, a relief, or a festival, played a strategic role in the empire's grand narrative. Politically, Persepolis was the ancient equivalent of a carefully curated Instagram feed. Every detail was designed to present Persia in the best possible light. The reliefs, for instance, were more than just eye candy. They were the empire's press releases, carved in stone. Each image was a message to subjects and rivals alike. Behold our unity and diversity. These were not just depictions of tribute bearers, but a visual census of the empire's vast reach, a reminder of how many people were under the Persian thumb. And talk about a diverse cast. Picture this: craftsmen from Egypt, Greece, and Babylon, all contributing their own flair to the grand tapestry of Persepolis. This wasn't just an artistic choice, but a political one, reinforcing the idea of a united empire. Darius knew the value of showcasing harmony, even if the reality was a bit more, shall we say, fractious. The empire was a patchwork quilt of cultures, and Persepolis was its centerpiece, a symbol of both unity and control. Speaking of control, let's not forget the role of Persepolis as a stage for political theater. The city was a hotspot for gatherings that put the G7 summit to shame. The annual Nowruz festival, celebrating the Persian New Year, was not just a party but a diplomatic bonanza. Delegates from across the empire gathered here to wine, dine, and pledge allegiance to the king. Gifts were exchanged, oaths were sworn, and alliances were forged, all under the watchful eyes of those stone guardians. But while the diplomats rubbed elbows and traded pleasantries, the real work of empire building continued behind the scenes. Persepolis was more than just a backdrop for political drama. It was a hub of bureaucratic activity, where the business of empire was conducted with relentless efficiency. The empire's vast bureaucracy was a machine that needed constant oiling, and Persepolis was both the heart and the engine room. Now, let's debunk a myth while we're at it. The idea that Persepolis was merely a playground for the elite. Sure, the upper crust might have had their fill of banquets and ceremonies, but the city was also a bustling center of administration. It was here that the empire's vast network of satrapies was managed, where edicts were issued, and where the wheels of governance turned. The city was a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where the ceremonial met the practical. Yet for all its pomp and pageantry, Persepolis was not immune to the challenges of ruling a sprawling empire. The very diversity that the city celebrated was also its Achilles heel. Keeping the many cultures and regions in line required a delicate balancing act, one that demanded both carrot and stick. Darius's policy of tolerance was as much a necessity as it was a gesture of goodwill. Allowing subjects to maintain their traditions was a smart move, but it required constant vigilance to prevent unrest. Economically, Persepolis was a symbol of the empire's wealth, but it was also a reminder of the costs of maintaining such grandeur. The construction and upkeep of the city were a drain on resources, a colossal investment that required a steady stream of revenue. The empire's coffers were filled by a combination of taxes, tribute, and a well-oiled system of trade routes. Yet, the same vastness that provided riches also posed logistical nightmares. Let's not gloss over the human element either. The laborers who built Persepolis were drawn from all corners of the empire, a testament to its reach and its ability to marshal resources. These workers, often overlooked in the grand narrative, were the backbone of Darius's vision. They toiled in the shadows of the grand columns, their sweat and toil immortalized not in stone, but in the city's very foundation. Despite the sweat and stone, Persepolis thrived as a cultural melting pot. The city was a confluence of languages, customs, and beliefs, a place where ideas were exchanged as freely as goods. This cultural exchange was not just a byproduct of empire, but a driving force behind its innovation and resilience. The Persians were adept at borrowing the best from their subjects, be it technology, art, or governance, and making it their own. In the end, Persepolis was more than just a pretty face. It was the beating heart of an empire, a testament to both the potential and the perils of human ambition. It was a place where dreams were etched into stone, where power was both celebrated and challenged. And as the sun set over its ruins, casting long shadows over the silent columns, it stood as a reminder of the heights of human achievement and the inevitability of change. As we wrap up this part of our journey, keep in mind that Persepolis was a stage where the drama of empire played out in all its glory and complexity. The city tells a story of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of greatness, tempered by the harsh realities of politics and power. And as we look to the next chapter, let's remember that while Persepolis may have been a symbol of an empire's might, it was also a reflection of its fragility, a theme we'll explore further as we continue to unravel the ancient tapestry of Persia. And so, as we transition from the drama of Persepolis' bustling heyday, we must strap in for the grand finale, a tale of fire, ambition, and a touch of hubris. You see, Persepolis wasn't just a jewel in the Persian crown. It was a target with a bullseye as big as the empire itself. Enter Alexander the Great, the Macedonian wonderkind with a penchant for empire building, and as it turns out, empire burning. In 330 BCE, Alexander waltzed into Persepolis, riding the wave of his conquests like a rock star on a world tour. His army, fueled by victories, and perhaps a bit too much adrenaline, saw the city not just as a prize, but as the ultimate trophy. And what do you do with a trophy when you've already got all the glory? Apparently, you set it on fire. Legend has it that the torching of Persepolis was the result of a drunken dare, a sort of ancient frat party gone horribly awry. But let's not oversimplify this into a mere act of vandalism. Alexander's decision was as much strategic as it was symbolic, a fiery exclamation point to his conquest of Persia. As the flames devoured the city, they consumed more than just stone and wood. They swallowed up a symbol of the Achaemenid Empire's might, leaving behind charred ruins and a hefty dose of irony. Here was a place that had stood as a testament to human achievement, brought down by the very force it sought to exemplify, ambition. It's like building a skyscraper, only to realize you've misplaced the blueprints for the fire escape. But what did this fiery end reveal about human nature? For one, it showcased the double-edged sword of ambition. Persepolis was built on dreams of grandeur, but in the end, it was consumed by the ambitions of another. Alexander's act was both a testament to his own vision of empire and a stark reminder of the transience of power. In the grand scheme of history, it's a tale as old as time. Today's conqueror is tomorrow's conquered. Now, let's not forget the economic and political ripple effects of this blaze. The destruction of Persepolis was a blow to the Achaemenid administrative network, a system that had managed to keep a sprawling empire running like a well-oiled chariot. The satraps, those regional bigwigs who kept the tribute and taxes flowing, suddenly found themselves without a central hub. It was as if the empire's motherboard had been fried, and the resulting chaos was an opportunity for Alexander to mold the region to his liking. Yet, for all the destruction, Persepolis left an indelible mark on history, both in the physical remnants and the metaphorical echoes that linger in our modern world. Today, the ruins stand as silent witnesses to a bygone era, their grandeur reduced to weathered stone and scattered columns. But don't be fooled by their silence. These ruins speak volumes. They remind us of the heights of human creativity and the depths of our folly. They are a testament to the fact that even the mightiest structures can be brought low by the simplest of elements: fire, ambition, and a little too much wine. In our age of glass skyscrapers and concrete jungles, Persepolis offers a poignant reflection. Sure, our buildings might reach for the clouds, but like the Persians, we must grapple with the impermanence of our creations. We live in a world where technology changes in the blink of an eye and power dynamics shift faster than you can say Silicon Valley. The story of Persepolis is a reminder that while our ambitions may soar, they remain tethered to the ground by the realities of human nature. But why does Persepolis continue to captivate us? Perhaps it's because, in those ruins, we see ourselves, a species driven by dreams and tempered by our own limitations. We are the architects of our own destinies, yet we are also at the mercy of forces beyond our control. Persepolis stands as a mirror, reflecting both our potential and our hubris. It's a cautionary tale wrapped in a marvel of engineering, a reminder that history has a way of repeating itself, often with a twist of irony. As we wrap up this historical journey, let's step back and take stock of the lessons Persepolis has to offer. It teaches us about ambition and its ability to both create and destroy. It shows us the power of unity and the fragility of even the most impressive empires. And it challenges us to look beyond the romanticized versions of history to see the realities that lie beneath the surface. In doing so, we gain a deeper appreciation for the stories etched in the stones of Persepolis and the echoes they leave in our modern world. So, as you drift off to sleep, let your thoughts wander back to that ancient city in the desert. Imagine the columns rising into the sky, the reliefs telling stories of power and tribute. Picture Alexander's flames dancing in the night, casting shadows over the ruins. Remember that while the city may have fallen, its legacy endures, a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of our ambition. And isn't that the ultimate takeaway? That even in the ashes of defeat, there is a story waiting to be told, a lesson waiting to be learned. Elizabeth Cady Stanton might have kicked off her life like any other 19th century girl, but it wasn't long before her story veered off into uncharted territory. Born on November 12, 1815, in Johnstown, New York, Elizabeth grew up in a world where women were more ornamental than influential. It's the kind of world where a woman's worth was measured by the neatness of her needlework and the number of pies she could bake, not the sharpness of her mind. But little Elizabeth was not having it. Her father, Daniel Cady, was a notable judge and a congressman, a man with a mind as sharp as a tack and a household full of books. Elizabeth, being the curious creature she was, devoured these books like candy. Now, you might think a judge would be delighted to have a daughter so intellectually inclined. But the 19th century had other ideas. Daniel Cady was actually more interested in his sons taking up the mantle. Unfortunately for him, those sons didn't stick around long enough to fulfill his expectations. Elizabeth's brother Eleazar, the chosen one, died young, leaving Elizabeth to hear her father lament, "Oh, my daughter, I wish you were a boy." Now, that's the kind of comment that could send anyone into a lifelong identity crisis, but not Elizabeth. No, she took it as a challenge. If her father wanted a son to carry his intellectual legacy, she would do it, just without the pesky gender reassignment. She decided to become a force in her own right, proving that girls could be just as formidable as any boy. Elizabeth's education was rich, considering the time. She attended Johnstown Academy, where she was one of the few girls in a sea of testosterone, and she excelled. By the age of 16, she was ready to take on Troy Female Seminary, an institution founded by Emma Willard, a pioneer in women's education. Troy Seminary was no finishing school. It was where young women went to learn things that might actually be useful, like mathematics and philosophy, not just how to curtsy and sip tea without spilling. While attending Troy, Elizabeth became quite the scholar, but she also witnessed firsthand the glaring disparities between men and women. She saw how women were discouraged from pursuing subjects deemed too intellectual, and she wasn't impressed. Instead, she began to formulate ideas about women's rights, ideas that would blossom into a full-blown movement. It was a slow burn, though, because back then, the only thing more unwanted than a smart woman was a smart woman who had opinions. Now, let's talk about how love and political strategy tangled up Elizabeth's life in a way that would make any soap opera writer proud. Enter Henry Brewster Stanton, an abolitionist and vigorous orator who caught Elizabeth's eye and heart. They met through mutual social reform circles, and their relationship was as much about politics as it was about romance. Henry was a staunch supporter of the anti-slavery movement, and his fiery speeches were legendary. Elizabeth, captivated by his ideals, and let's be honest, more than a little by him, saw a partnership that could be both personally fulfilling and politically advantageous. In 1840, the couple decided to marry, but not without a little drama. Elizabeth insisted on omitting the word obey from her wedding vows, a scandalous move at the time. This was 1840, remember, when the idea of a wife not promising to obey her husband was akin to suggesting that cats and dogs should start living together. But Elizabeth was adamant. She was marrying a man, not joining a convent. Their marriage was a meeting of minds as much as it was of hearts. Elizabeth and Henry's honeymoon was less about romantic strolls and more about radical activism. They traveled to London for the World Anti-Slavery Convention, eager to join the fight for abolition. But surprise, surprise, Elizabeth found herself sidelined because of her gender. The convention organizers, in their infinite wisdom, decided that women should be seen and not heard, relegating them to the back of the room like naughty schoolchildren. This experience was a pivotal moment for Elizabeth, highlighting the absurdity of fighting for freedom while being denied her own rights simply because of her gender. This was the spark she needed. If her father's comment had lit the match, the London conference poured gasoline on the fire. Elizabeth returned to the United States with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to tackle the beast of women's suffrage head-on. She may not have been able to speak at the convention, but she would make sure her voice was heard back home. The stakes were high, and the journey was long, but Elizabeth Cady Stanton was not one to shy away from a challenge. She was smart, she was driven, and she was just getting started. Her early life set the stage for a crusade that would upend societal norms and pave the way for future generations. And as for her father's wish for a son, let's just say Elizabeth more than exceeded his expectations, proving that sometimes the best man for the job is a woman. As if Elizabeth needed any more fire in her belly, her return from the London conference was only the beginning of the whirlwind. Enter Susan B. Anthony, stage right. Now, if history is a play, these two were the dynamic duo, Batman and Robin of the suffrage movement, minus the capes, but with plenty of crusading zeal. Their partnership was not just a meeting of minds. It was the start of a movement that would shake the very foundations of societal norms. Elizabeth and Susan first crossed paths in the 1850s, thanks to a mutual friend, Amelia Bloomer. Yes, that's right. The very same Amelia Bloomer who popularized those puffy pantaloon-like garments that scandalized polite society. But back to our leading ladies. Susan was as single-minded as they come, a Quaker with a penchant for no-nonsense pragmatism and a wardrobe as severe as her focus. While Elizabeth was the thinker, the rider, the philosopher of the pair, Susan was the organizer, the strategist, the one who could get things done. Together, they were a force of nature, like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Elizabeth the rich aroma, Susan the caffeine kick. Their partnership officially kicked off in 1851, and they quickly realized they needed a platform, a big one. Cue the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, the very first women's rights convention in the United States, which Elizabeth had already helped organize. This was the Woodstock of women's rights, minus the mud and rock bands, but with plenty of revolutionary spirit. Held at the Westline Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York, this gathering was a bold statement. About 300 people showed up, which, for the 1840s, was practically a marsh pit of progressive thinking. Now, organizing this event was no small feat. Picture trying to plan a wedding with no Pinterest, no internet, and no reliable postal service. Elizabeth, along with fellow agitators like Lucretia Mott and Mary Ann McClintock, cobbled together what they could. It was a logistical nightmare, like trying to herd cats, but the cats are all busy breaking down the patriarchy. The convention produced the Declaration of Sentiments, a document modeled after the Declaration of Independence, which boldly proclaimed that all men and women are created equal. It was a revolutionary idea, and it had all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. The document listed 18 grievances, including the lack of women's suffrage, the inability to own property, and the absence of educational opportunities. It was signed by 68 women and 32 men, a daring act of defiance in a world still figuring out what to do with educated women. Elizabeth's role in this convention wasn't just as an organizer. She was the keynote speaker, delivering a speech that was as fiery as it was eloquent. Picture her standing there, a woman in a crinoline dress, yet speaking with a voice that could cut through the silence like a hot knife through butter. Her words resonated, and they echoed far beyond the walls of that chapel. Enter Susan, whose work alongside Elizabeth would help turn these ideas into action. They launched into a nationwide campaign for women's rights, a quest that involved traveling thousands of miles, often by horse-drawn carriage or steam locomotive. And let's not sugarcoat it, folks. This was a time when travel was less about convenience and more about survival. Think long, bumpy rides over dirt roads, where the only thing more treacherous than the journey was the public's reaction to their message. In the face of constant opposition, they soldiered on. Susan, with her relentless energy, would often take to the road, speaking at rallies and organizing events, while Elizabeth, tethered by her growing family, wielded her pen like a weapon. Their correspondence was prolific, with letters flying back and forth, filled with strategy, encouragement, and the occasional venting session about the challenges they faced. Imagine two generals planning a campaign, but instead of armies, they were marshalling ideas and words. Their crusade wasn't just about speeches and pamphlets. It was about changing hearts and minds. And oh boy, was it an uphill battle. They faced derision from the press, dismissals from politicians, and outright hostility from many quarters. Yet they pressed on, because they knew that the status quo wasn't just wrong, it was untenable. In a world where women were expected to be seen and not heard, Elizabeth and Susan were loud, proud, and unapologetic. They weren't just fighting for the right to vote, they were fighting for the right to be. And while they didn't live to see the fruits of their labor, the 19th Amendment granting women the vote would come in 1920, long after their deaths. The seeds they planted were growing. So there you have it, the beginnings of a partnership that would change history. A friendship forged in the fires of activism, fueled by a shared vision of equality. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were more than just allies. They were pioneers, blazing a trail for future generations. Their story is one of courage, conviction, and the unyielding belief that a better world was not only possible but necessary. And as for those logistical nightmares and humorous misadventures, well, let's just say that even superheroes have their off days, but that never stopped them from saving the world. Now, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony's relentless campaign for women's rights setting the stage. Let's dive into what could be described as one of the boldest moves of Stanton's career, her audacious foray into religious critique with the Woman's Bible. Imagine the scene. It's the late 19th century, and Stanton, ever the intellectual provocateur, decides it's high time to tackle the sacred cow of religion. Why? Because she believed that religion was one of the main culprits keeping women in subjugation. The Bible, she argued, had been wielded like a weapon to keep women in their place, and she was ready to challenge that narrative. So, in 1895, Stanton published The Woman's Bible, a two-part commentary that sought to dissect and reinterpret the scriptures from a feminist perspective. Now, this wasn't just a casual weekend project. It was a full-on scholarly endeavor, involving a committee of women who pored over biblical texts. The goal, to demonstrate that the often-cited passages used to justify women's inferiority were not only misinterpreted, but were also products of a patriarchal society that had twisted the original meanings to suit its purposes. Stanton didn't mince words. She was critical, she was irreverent, and she was unapologetic. She saw the Bible as a document that had been manipulated over centuries to reinforce the notion that women were the secondary sex. Her work was a direct challenge to religious orthodoxy, and she was prepared for the fallout, or so she thought. The backlash was as swift as it was fierce. Many who had been her allies in the women's suffrage movement suddenly found themselves at odds with her. The National American Woman Suffrage Association, NAWSA, which Stanton herself had helped found, distanced itself from the Woman's Bible. They worried that her controversial views on religion would alienate potential supporters and derail the suffrage movement. In their 1896 convention, NAWSA officially disassociated itself from the project, a move akin to a public shunning in the age of Twitter. Naturally, Stanton wasn't about to back down. In her typical wry fashion, she pointed out the irony of their concerns. If they were fighting for women's rights, shouldn't they also fight for the right to question oppressive doctrines? She maintained her sense of humor, even as she faced criticism from friends and foes alike. Stanton quipped that she was too busy to be angry, which, if nothing else, is a masterclass in maintaining grace under fire. But let's not paint this picture with pure heroism and ignore the complexities of Stanton's approach. Yes, she was an intellectual heavyweight, unafraid of taking on the establishment, but her methods were divisive. Some argued that her focus on religion was a distraction from the pressing issue of suffrage. Others felt she was too radical, that her ideas were ahead of their time, though that's often a euphemism for you're making us uncomfortable. Yet, Stanton's gamble on the Woman's Bible was more than just a controversial blip in her career. It underscored a critical point about the suffrage movement itself. It was not a monolith. Within its ranks were women of various beliefs and strategies, each with their own vision of what true equality entailed. Stanton's work highlighted the intersection of gender, religion, and politics in a way that forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about societal norms. From an economic standpoint, Stanton's critique of religious structures also pointed to the way these systems perpetuated economic dependency. She argued that by keeping women in domestic roles, religion was complicit in economic inequality. Women were not just fighting for the vote, they were fighting for the right to work, to earn, and to be financially independent, factors that were crucial for true liberation. In an era when the average annual wage for women was a fraction of what men earned, often less than $300, the economic dimension of her critique was not just relevant, it was essential. So, while the Woman's Bible might not have been a bestseller, it was a catalyst for discussion and debate. It forced the movement to grapple with the broader implications of women's rights beyond just the ballot box. It was a reminder that the fight for equality was as much about challenging ideas as it was about changing laws. Stanton, ever the pragmatist, knew that revolutions aren't built on consensus, but on courage. Her willingness to tackle religion head-on showed that she wasn't just a suffragist. She was an iconoclast. She was willing to take the heat if it meant pushing the boundaries of what was possible for women. And while the Woman's Bible might not have been her most celebrated achievement, it was undoubtedly one of her most daring. In the end, Stanton's story is a testament to the power of questioning the status quo. She didn't just ask for change, she demanded it. With a pen as sharp as her wit, and a resolve as unyielding as her vision for a better world. The backlash she faced was intense, but it never diminished her spirit. If anything, it underscored her belief that the road to equality was a long one, filled with bumps, detours, and the occasional storm, but one worth traveling all the same. As we pause in our narrative, remember that Stanton's journey was far from over. Her life was a tapestry of triumphs and tribulations, a relentless pursuit of justice that would continue to inspire generations. So stay tuned, because the story of Elizabeth Cady Stanton is a saga, not a short story, and there's plenty more to unravel. As we continue unraveling the saga of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, it becomes clear that her activism was like an ever-expanding universe, constantly reaching into new realms, from abolition to labor rights. For Stanton, the fight for equality wasn't confined to the narrow corridors of voting booths. It sprawled across a landscape riddled with issues just as pressing, if not more so. If you thought she was just about waving a Votes for Women banner, think again. She was the Swiss Army knife of social reform, equipped to tackle a variety of injustices. Now, let's talk abolition, a cause that was practically woven into the fabric of Stanton's life. This wasn't just a side quest, it was a core mission, intertwined with her push for women's rights. You could say she was a multitasking pioneer. Unlike your average 19th century activist who might focus on a single issue, Stanton was juggling the societal equivalent of flaming torches. She understood that the fight against slavery and the fight for women's rights were two sides of the same coin. Both were about dismantling systems that thrived on subjugation and inequality. Stanton's commitment to abolition was deeply personal. Her marriage to Henry Brewster Stanton, the abolitionist orator, was a partnership built on shared values. Together, they were a kind of 19th century power couple, not the red carpet type, but the kind you'd find in the trenches of social reform. Henry's speeches could rally a crowd, while Elizabeth's pen could rally a movement. And though they didn't always see eye to eye, more on that later, their shared vision for a more just society was never in question. But let's not gloss over the complexities here. Stanton's abolitionist stance was not without its controversies. She was part of a movement that was often divided along lines of strategy and priorities. Some abolitionists viewed women's rights as a distraction from the more urgent matter of ending slavery. Others, like Stanton, argued that the two causes were inseparable. This tension wasn't just theoretical. It played out in meetings, speeches, and sometimes heated debates. It was like trying to organize a family reunion where half the relatives refused to talk to the other half. In 1866, Stanton and Susan B. Anthony formed the American Equal Rights Association, a bold attempt to unite the causes of women's suffrage and racial equality. It was a noble idea, but like many noble ideas, it was fraught with challenges. The association aimed to secure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of race or gender, an ambitious agenda in a nation still reeling from the Civil War. But unity proved elusive, and the organization eventually splintered over disagreements about whether to support the 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote, but excluded women. This was a pivotal moment for Stanton, and not one of her most shining. She and Anthony opposed the amendment, arguing that it was unjust to enfranchise black men while leaving all women disenfranchised. This stance alienated many of their former allies in the abolitionist movement and underscored a racial tension that haunted the suffrage movement. It's a reminder that even pioneers can stumble, and that the road to equality is often littered with moral potholes. But before you write Stanton off as an irredeemable figure, let's look at her foray into labor rights, an area where her vision was undeniably ahead of its time. Stanton believed that economic independence was crucial for women's empowerment. She understood that the right to vote was only part of the equation. Women also needed the means to support themselves. In an era when women were often paid a pittance for their labor, if they were allowed to work at all, Stanton argued for fair wages and better working conditions. In 1868, she became the first woman to run for Congress, though her bid was largely symbolic. She knew she wouldn't win, but her candidacy was a statement, a declaration that women had a right to participate in the political process at every level. It was as if she was saying, if you won't give us a seat at the table, we'll bring our own chairs. Her campaign highlighted issues like the wage gap and the need for labor reforms, topics that were as relevant then as they are today. Now, it's easy to get swept up in the headlines of her public life, but let's not forget that Elizabeth Cady Stanton was also a mother of 7. Yes, you heard that right. 7 kids. It's like she was running her own personal daycare while simultaneously trying to change the world. If you've ever tried to juggle work and family, imagine adding a social justice crusade to the mix. Just picturing the logistics is enough to make your head spin. Stanton's ability to balance motherhood with activism was nothing short of remarkable. Her children grew up in a household that was a hotbed of intellectual activity and social reform. Imagine dinner table conversations that ranged from the latest political strategies to the finer points of Latin grammar. It's safe to say that the Stanton household wasn't your typical 19th century family setting. She often wrote her speeches and articles with children underfoot, proving that the personal is political and sometimes chaotic. But let's not romanticize it too much. Stanton's dual roles came with their own set of challenges. She faced criticism for being a mother who dared to have a public life, a notion that was scandalous at the time. In a world where a woman's place was supposed to be in the home, Stanton's activism was seen by some as neglectful. Yet she persevered, showing that women could be both caregivers and change-makers. Stanton's life was a constant balancing act, one where she had to weigh her responsibilities as a mother against her commitment to social justice. It was a tightrope walk, but she managed it with a tenacity that was as impressive as it was inspiring. Her ability to navigate these dual roles spoke volumes about her commitment to her cause and her belief that women could and should have it all. In the grand tapestry of history, Elizabeth Cady Stanton is a figure who defies easy categorization. She was bold, brilliant, and occasionally flawed. Her activism spanned issues that were both interconnected and sometimes in tension with each other. She was a woman who dared to challenge the status quo at every turn, even when it meant facing criticism from her peers. And while she didn't see the full fruits of her labor in her lifetime, her legacy is a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of intersectional activism. As we dig deeper into Stanton's life, it's clear that her story is far from over. Her journey through the turbulent waters of social reform offers lessons that are as relevant today as they were in the 19th century. So as we pause here, remember that Elizabeth Cady Stanton was more than a suffragist icon. She was a trailblazer in every sense of the word, navigating a path that was uniquely her own. And as for what's next, well, let's just say there's plenty more to explore. Stay tuned. As we dive into the final chapter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's saga, let's take a moment to savor the irony. Here was a woman who spent her life fighting for the right to vote, yet she didn't live to see the day when women finally walked into polling stations without needing a man's permission slip. Talk about a plot twist worthy of a Greek tragedy. Right. Stanton passed away in 1902, full 18 years before the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, granting women across the United States the long-denied right to vote. The 19th Amendment wasn't just a legal change. It was the result of decades of tireless campaigning, protests, and yes, even a sprinkle of civil disobedience. It was a hard-fought victory, not the kind that unfolds in a neat, linear narrative. This was more like a roller coaster of setbacks and triumphs, with suffragists like Stanton laying the groundwork and others picking up the baton. It's worth noting that Stanton wasn't the only one who didn't see this victory. Susan B. Anthony, her lifelong partner in suffrage crime, also missed it by 14 years. Now let's talk legacy, because Stanton left a mark deeper than any chiseled marble statue could convey. Her life was a testament to the idea that change often starts with a whisper, but requires a shout to be heard. She was the intellectual powerhouse who dared to question the very fabric of societal norms, and for that, she was both lauded and lambasted. Her legacy is like a complex tapestry, rich, colorful, but with a few frayed edges. One of the myths about Stanton is the romanticized notion of her as a one-woman army, single-handedly paving the way for women's rights. While she was indeed a force of nature, she was also part of a broader movement with countless women and men who contributed to the cause. The reality is, no one does it alone. Her story reminds us that while individual actions matter, collective effort is what truly drives change. On the flip side, Stanton wasn't without her controversies. Her opposition to the 15th Amendment which prioritized racial equality over gender, left a sour note that still resonates today. She and Anthony's stance alienated them from many in the abolitionist community, highlighting the racial tensions that were, and still are, part of the suffrage movement. This isn't just a footnote. It's a reminder that progress isn't always pretty. Yet, Stanton's vision extended beyond suffrage. She was a vocal advocate for women's economic independence, understanding that financial freedom was just as crucial as the right to vote. In an era when women were expected to rely on their husbands for financial support, Stanton's call for economic empowerment was nothing short of revolutionary. She knew that without financial autonomy, true equality was a pipe dream. And let's not forget her daring critique of religion with the Woman's Bible. It wasn't just about reinterpreting scripture. It was about challenging the structures that had kept women in subservience for centuries. Stanton faced a tidal wave of backlash for this, including from her own allies. But she wasn't deterred. She understood that challenging deeply ingrained beliefs was like trying to turn a cruise ship with a rowboat, slow, arduous, but essential if you want to change course. So, what can we glean from Stanton's life? For starters, that the fight for equality is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about laying groundwork, planting seeds, and understanding that you might not be the one to see them bloom. Her work was unfinished, but that doesn't diminish its impact. It's a reminder that every step forward is built on the backs of those who dared to challenge the status quo. Stanton's story is also a cautionary tale about the perils of putting movements on pedestals. The suffrage movement was flawed, rife with its own internal conflicts and contradictions, but those imperfections are part of what makes its story so compelling. It wasn't just a straight line to victory. It was a messy, complex journey with lessons that still resonate today. In the end, Stanton's legacy is as much about the questions she raised as the answers she provided. She forced society to confront uncomfortable truths and dared to imagine a world where women were equals in all spheres of life. Her life was a blend of brilliance and blunder, a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of questioning everything. As we wrap up this historical Odyssey, remember that Stanton's story is far from a relic of the past. Her life's work continues to inspire and challenge us, proving that while the arc of history might bend toward justice, it's the push from determined individuals that gets it there. So here's to Elizabeth Cady Stanton, an icon, an iconoclast, and a reminder that the fight for equality is as relevant today as it was in her time. You snap awake in Tudor England, where the morning chill bites harder than a debt collector's knock. Congratulations! You're now a cook in the 16th century, a time when breakfast is less of a gourmet affair and more of a survival strategy. The rooster crows, not as a gentle wake-up call, but as a reminder that you've got a mountain of work ahead, and no snooze button in sight. Now, let's talk bread, the cornerstone of every Tudor meal. You might think bread is simple, but welcome to the 1500, where baking involves more arithmetic than your average algebra class. You've got to figure out how to stretch your wheat supply, which is no easy feat, given that a loaf costs about a penny, a hefty chunk of change when your yearly income is around £6. Don't mess up the math, otherwise you're not just dealing with a burnt crust, but a financial crisis. The bread you're baking isn't your modern supermarket fluff loaf. Nope, it's a farthing loaf, named after the coin it costs. But what's in it? Well, if you're lucky, you've got wheat. If not, it's a mystery mix of whatever grains are hanging around. Think of it as the mystery meat of bread, just with more potential splinters. And while you're kneading dough, let's chew over the economics. Bread is serious business. In a world where grain harvests can make or break a kingdom, the price of bread is a political barometer, so much so that the assize of bread and ale, a medieval regulation, still influences prices by the 1500. If you think modern food regulations are a headache, try keeping track of a system where the price of bread is tied to the weight of a silver penny. But hey, what's bread without a drink? Enter ale, which flows more freely than water, partly because it's safer. Tudor water sources are about as reliable as a Tudor doctor. Ale, on the other hand, is a fermented wonder, purifying the water and keeping people hydrated and happy, or at least not thirsty. As a cook, knowing your ale gallons is crucial, since serving the wrong measure could cost you your job, or worse, your head. You'd better remember, an ale gallon is about 282 cubic inches, not the 231 cubic inches of a modern gallon. Yes, even your liquids come with a math test attached. Now, back to the kitchen, where Tudor cooks are the unsung heroes of the household. You're juggling more than just loaves and ale. You're managing a team of scullery boys and kitchen maids, each with less experience than a first-year intern at a startup. And the stakes? High. A single mistake could ruin a meal or, even worse, offend your employer. And offending the nobility, not an option unless you fancy a swift career change to dungeon dweller. So why does all this bread and ale business matter? Because in Tudor England, food isn't just sustenance, it's power. Control the bread and you control the people. Fail to provide it and you risk unrest. The bread riots of the 1590s weren't just about hunger, they were about survival and dignity. When the price of grain skyrocketed, so did tempers. Bread was more than a meal. It was a symbol of stability and fairness, or the lack thereof. But don't romanticize it too much. The daily life of a Tudor cook is hard graft with little glory. You're a cog in the vast machine of a household, laboring away before the sun rises and after it sets. Yet without you, the household grinds to a halt. So you rise with the dawn, face a day that's a marathon of mixing, kneading, and brewing, and hope to make it through without a catastrophic miscalculation. With each successful loaf, you're not just feeding mouths, you're feeding an economy, a society, and indirectly a kingdom. And that's a slice of history worth savoring. Now, as the sun inches higher, and the kitchen begins to hum with the clatter of pots and pans, it's time to peel back the layers of Tudor kitchen life. It's like peeling an onion, but without the tears, hopefully. You're not just here to whip up a meal, you're navigating a social ladder that's as rigid as a knight's codpiece. The master cook stands at the helm, a culinary captain steering a ship full of chaos and ambition. But don't let the title fool you into thinking he's the top dog. In the Tudor household hierarchy, he's king of the kitchen, but still a pawn to the lord of the manor. Think of the master cook as the Gordon Ramsay of his day, minus the TV cameras and the expletives, though I wouldn't rule those out entirely. He's got the power to make or break your day, your meal, and possibly your career. His word is law, and breaking it could land you in harder water than the soup du jour. But don't be too quick to envy his position. While he's got authority, he's also got the responsibility to ensure that every dish is fit for a king, or at least the local gentry. Mess up, and his head's on the chopping block, metaphorically speaking, usually. Hierarchy in a Tudor kitchen is a game of thrones on a smaller scale. Below the master cook are the undercooks, who learn the trade while dodging both flying saucepans and political pitfalls. Then you have the scullery boys and kitchen maids, who are the real workhorses, scrubbing parts and peeling vegetables until their hands are as tough as leather. And let's not forget the spit boys, who, quite literally, turn the meat on the spit for hours on end. It's a job so monotonous it makes watching paint dry seem like a carnival ride, but it's a crucial one. Burn the roast for the Lord's feast, and you might find yourself demoted to chasing rats out of the pantry. And speaking of feasts, let's debunk a myth or two. We often imagine Tudor dining tables groaning under the weight of extravagant banquets, with more courses than you can count on both hands. Sure, those lavish spreads did exist, but they were reserved for special occasions like weddings or visits from the monarch. On a regular day, the menu was more likely to feature pottage, a kind of thick stew made from whatever was lying around the kitchen. It's the culinary equivalent of clean out your fridge night. But why is this hierarchy so important, you ask? Because in the Tudor world, your place in the kitchen reflects your place in society. The kitchen is a microcosm of the kingdom, with its own rules, politics, and power struggles. The master cook might wield a ladle like a scepter, but he's still subject to the whims of his noble employers. And those employers, well, they're constantly maneuvering to climb the social ladder themselves, hosting grand feasts to showcase their wealth and curry favor with the higher-ups. It's a delicate dance where one wrong step, like serving a dish that's too cold or too salty, can lead to social disaster. Now, let's talk economics, because in the Tudor kitchen, everything has a price. The cost of ingredients is a constant concern, especially when a bad harvest can send prices soaring higher than a falcon on a hunt. A kitchen that goes over budget risks the wrath of the steward, the man who holds the purse strings. And while the master cook might be a culinary genius, he's also a budget manager, tasked with balancing the books while satisfying the palate. It's a balancing act worthy of a tightrope walker, and one misstep could mean financial ruin, not just for the kitchen, but for the entire household. And then there's the politics. The kitchen is a hotbed of intrigue, where alliances are forged over a shared loaf of bread and rivalries simmer like a pot of stew. Everyone's vying for a better position or a bigger share of the pie, literally and figuratively. The kitchen is where the ambitious can make their mark, but it's also where they can meet their downfall, make the right connections, and you might find yourself moving up the ranks, but cross the wrong person, and you could be out on your ear faster than you can say pigeon pie. So, as you stir the pot and keep one eye on the master cook, remember that you're not just preparing a meal. You're playing a part in a grand social performance, where every dish is a status symbol and every bite is a taste of power. The Tudor kitchen might be a place of hard work and humble fare, but it's also a stage where the drama of life plays out in daily bread and common ale. And while the myths of sumptuous feasts may linger, the reality is a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes, feeding not just bodies, but ambitions and aspirations as well. Stay sharp, because the kitchen is no place for the faint-hearted. It's a battlefield of flavors and fortunes, where the stakes are as high as the towering pies that sometimes grace the table. And while the myth of the Tudor feast may capture the imagination, it's the reality of the daily grind that truly tells the tale. As the clock strikes midday, you might expect a Tudor lunchtime to resemble something straight out of a medieval fairy tale. Spoiler alert, it's more pit stop than palatial banquet. Sure, the nobility occasionally indulged in meals that looked like a Renaissance painting come to life, but for the rest of us mere mortals, lunchtime was a practical affair fought against the backdrop of a kitchen that was more inferno than inspiration. Open hearths were the norm, providing not just heat for cooking, but also the occasional third-degree burn. It's hard to romanticize a setting where the biggest challenge isn't crafting a culinary masterpiece, but avoiding setting yourself on fire. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Tudor cooking, where practicality ruled the day. The open hearth was both a heart and headache of the Tudor kitchen. Imagine a setup that's part barbecue, part medieval death trap, a roaring fire, swinging parts, and an ever-present risk of your stew doubling as a fire hazard. For all its charm, this hearth was less about gourmet artistry and more about survival. Cooking here meant navigating a minefield where one misstep could lead to charred eyebrows or a singed tunic. The ingredients tossed into those cauldrons depended largely on your station in life. If you were a commoner, your menu was likely as humble as your bank account. Think grains, vegetables, and the occasional sliver of meat if you were lucky. Pardage, the thick stew we mentioned earlier, was a staple, often concocted from leftovers and spiced with a dash of desperation. Meanwhile, the gentry dined on more exotic fare, swan, peacock, or perhaps a roast boar if they wanted to flaunt their wealth. But let's not kid ourselves. Even the poshest of Tudor spreads was far from today's Michelin-starred dining experience. The differences in diet weren't just about taste. They were a direct reflection of economic disparity. Take saffron, for instance. This spice was the Tudor equivalent of gold dust. A pound could set you back the equivalent of several months' wages, making it the ultimate status symbol. You didn't just sprinkle saffron on your dish. You flaunted it like a Tudor fashionista showing off the season's latest ruff. Meanwhile, cooks in humbler households had to be more resourceful than a squirrel in winter, stretching every ingredient to its limit and beyond. But let's not get too starry-eyed about the nobility's lavish spreads. Those sumptuous Tudor banquets we all imagine, reserved for special occasions, often as rare as a solar eclipse. Day-to-day dining was far more modest, even for the well-heeled. And while a feast might feature a staggering array of dishes, remember that Tudor health codes were less stringent than a pirate's code of ethics. Food poisoning was practically a rite of passage, and the only cure was a hearty dose of medieval fortitude. Despite the romanticized images of Tudor revelry, the reality was often less about luxury and more about logistics. Consider the logistics of feeding a household where the kitchen staff was a small army in itself. Every meal required coordination that would make a modern-day event planner weep. The master cook, that culinary commander we met earlier, juggled duties akin to those of a military general, orchestrating every dish with the precision of a well-timed siege. His job was less about personal glory and more about ensuring that every meal was fit for the table, and the reputation of the household. Economic factors played a starring role in shaping the Tudor diet. Harvests were unpredictable, and a bad one could send grain prices soaring like a falcon on the hunt. This volatility meant that cooks had to be as adept with numbers as they were with knives. An overcooked roast was one thing, but an overdrawn budget was a disaster of epic proportions. In a world where a loaf of bread could incite riots, the kitchen was not just a place of culinary creativity, but a battleground of economic survival. In this high-stakes environment, creativity was the secret ingredient. Cooks became culinary MacGyvers, stretching ingredients further than a court jester's patience. Leftovers were reinvented, and nothing went to waste. This resourcefulness wasn't just a necessity. It was a skill honed through necessity, a testament to the resilience of those who labored tirelessly over hot hearths and bubbling pots. The Tudor kitchen was a cacophony of sounds, a symphony of clanging pots and crackling fires. Yet beneath this chaos lay a rhythm as precise as any courtly dance. Every chop, stir, and seasoning was a step in a complex ballet, with each member of the kitchen staff playing their part. From the lowliest scullery maid to the esteemed master cook, everyone had a role to play in the grand theatre of Tudor dining. And speaking of roles, let's not forget the economic puppeteer behind the scenes, the steward. This financial wizard wielded the household budget like a maestro with a baton. A single miscalculation, and the entire operation could crumble faster than a poorly made pie crust. The steward's vigilance ensured the kitchen remained within budget, balancing the books with the precision of an accountant and the flair of a seasoned gambler. As lunchtime rolled on, the kitchen crew would take a moment to catch their breath, a brief pause in the culinary marathon. But this wasn't a leisurely break. It was a pit stop, a chance to regroup and prepare for the next round of culinary challenges. The kitchen was a place of camaraderie and competition, where alliances were forged over a shared loaf of bread and rivalries simmered like a pot of stew. It was a world of high stakes and higher pressure, where every meal was a test of skill, endurance, and ingenuity. The myths of sumptuous Tudor feasts may capture the imagination, but the reality was a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes. These cooks were the unsung heroes of their time, feeding not just bodies, but the ambitions and aspirations of a society in flux. Their stories, like the meals they prepared, were rich with flavor and complexity, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the midday sun cast its warm glow over the bustling kitchen, it was clear that the heart of the household wasn't just a place of labor. It was a crucible of creativity, a forge where the ordinary was transformed into the extraordinary. The Tudor kitchen, with all its challenges and triumphs, was a microcosm of the world outside its hearth-lit walls, a reflection of the society it sustained. So, as you stir the pot and keep one eye on the master cook, remember that you're not just preparing a meal. You're playing a part in a grand social performance, where every dish is a status symbol and every bite is a taste of power. The Tudor kitchen might be a place of hard work and humble fare, but it's also a stage where the drama of life plays out in daily bread and common ale. And while the myths of sumptuous feasts may linger, the reality is a testament to the grit and guile of those who toiled behind the scenes, feeding not just bodies, but ambitions and aspirations as well. Stay sharp, because the kitchen is no place for the faint-hearted. It's a battlefield of flavors and fortunes, where the stakes are as high as the towering pies that sometimes grace the table. And while the myth of the Tudor feast may capture the imagination, it's the reality of the daily grind that truly tells the tale. As the afternoon shadows lengthen, and the kitchen's frenetic pace continues unabated, let's dive headfirst into the conundrum that is food preservation in the Tudor era, a time when refrigerators were as fantastical as dragons and unicorns. Here, preservation wasn't just a culinary concern. It was a matter of life and death, a delicate dance with spoilage that would make even the most seasoned chef break a sweat. Enter spices, the Tudor kitchen's version of Instagram filters, masking imperfections and adding a dash of flair. But let's be clear, these spices were more than just culinary bling. They were the social media likes and shares of their time, each pinch a declaration of wealth and worldly sophistication. Forget about your avocado toast. In Tudor England, a sprinkle of cinnamon was the ultimate status update. Now, let's talk economics. Spices were the Bitcoin of the Tudor world, with values that fluctuated more wildly than a court jester's jigs. Take pepper, for example. This unassuming berry was so precious it was counted out like gold coins, with a single pound costing a week's wages for a skilled laborer. Imagine paying that much for something you'd sneeze at, literally. The spice trade was a global enterprise, a web of routes that spanned continents and seas, bringing the far reaches of the world into the heart of England. It was a logistical nightmare that would make a modern supply chain manager shudder. Spices traveled thousands of miles, from the spice-laden islands of Indonesia through the bustling markets of Venice, eventually making their way to London's docks. Each step in this long journey added another layer of cost and complexity, turning these aromatic wonders into the ultimate luxury items. But let's not kid ourselves. Spices weren't just about taste. The olfactory overload often served a more pragmatic purpose, masking the less-than-fresh aromas of meats that had seen better days. In an age before refrigeration, spoilage was the arch-nemesis of the Tudor cook. Cooks had to be more cunning than a fox at a chicken coop, using spice blends to camouflage the scent of questionable freshness. It was a culinary cat-and-mouse game where more often than not, the mice had the upper hand. And while we're busy myth-busting, let's tackle the legend of the Tudor palate, often imagined as a cavalcade of exotic flavors and daring combinations. In reality, the heavy-handed use of spices wasn't a reflection of adventurous taste buds, but a necessity born of survival. The idea was less about tantalizing the tongue and more about ensuring you didn't spend the night praying to the porcelain god, or in this case, the wooden chamber pot. This brings us to the economic theater in which these spices played their parts. The Tudor era was a time of burgeoning global trade, where the fortunes of entire nations were tied to these fragrant commodities. The spice trade was a high-stakes game, a geopolitical chess match where each move could alter the balance of power. England's growing appetite for spices fed into its ambitions for empire, fueling exploration and colonization efforts that would reverberate through the centuries. Our obsession with spices was both a reflection of and a catalyst for change in the Tudor world. It was a time when the kitchen was a crucible of innovation, where cooks experimented with new flavors like alchemists seeking the philosopher's stone. Yet, it was also a period of stark contrasts, where the fragrant allure of spices belied the harsh realities of a world grappling with scarcity and uncertainty. So, as you stand over the hearth, adding a pinch of nutmeg here or a dash of saffron there, remember that you're not just seasoning a dish. You're participating in a global narrative of trade, exploration, and wealth. The Tudor kitchen was less about culinary artistry and more about navigating a world of flavors that spoke of far-off lands and untold riches. As the afternoon light fades and the evening meal looms on the horizon, take a moment to savor the complexity of this world. It's a place where the mundane act of cooking becomes a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, where the kitchen is not just a place to prepare food, but a stage upon which the dramas of power, status, and survival play out in a grand, ongoing performance. And as you sprinkle that final touch of spice onto your dish, remember that you're not just crafting a meal, you're weaving a story, one rich with history and flavor, a tapestry of human experience that echoes through time. The Tudor kitchen may be gone, but its legacy lingers on, a reminder of the indomitable spirit that continues to flavor our world today. As the sun dips below the horizon, leaving the Tudor kitchen bathed in the dim glow of flickering hearth flames, the day's culinary symphony winds down to its final notes. Evening in a Tudor kitchen is less about romantic candlelit dinners and more about tackling the aftermath of a day that felt longer than a Shakespearean soliloquy. Here, the cook's journey isn't so much about winding down as it is about setting the stage for tomorrow's encore performance. First up on the evening agenda, cleaning. Now, if you think tidying up your modern kitchen is a chore, try scrubbing soot-blackened pots and pans that have been through a day's worth of open-hearth warfare. The kitchen staff gets to work, wielding brooms and scrub brushes in a synchronized dance that's part necessity, part survival. Remember, this is an era where sanitation is more of a suggestion than a standard practice. Soap, only if you're lucky. Instead, they rely on sand and ashes as their go-to abrasives, scouring away the day's grime with all the subtlety of a medieval battle axe. Let's not forget the floors. These aren't your sleek, easy-to-clean linoleum surfaces. No, we're talking straw-strewn dirt floors, where the detritus of the day, crumbs, bones, and the occasional rat dropping, gets swept into oblivion. This is more than just housekeeping. It's a matter of hygiene in a world where the word plague isn't just a historical footnote, but a real lurking menace. But cleaning isn't just about aesthetics or hygiene. It's a deeply practical exercise, driven by the economic realities of the time. Resources are scarce, and waste is tantamount to financial folly. Every scrap saved is a potential ingredient for tomorrow's pottage, and every penny pinched could be the difference between solvency and hardship. This isn't just a kitchen, it's a microeconomy, where every action has a ripple effect on the household's bottom line. Once the last part is scrubbed, and the hearth is banked for the night, the focus shifts to preparation. The Tudor kitchen is a machine that never truly stops, even when the fires die down. Tomorrow's menu looms large, a constant reminder that today's success is only as good as tomorrow's planning. This is where the cook's creativity shines, and where the seeds of modern culinary practices are sown. Consider, for example, the art of pickling and preserving, techniques honed to perfection by necessity. In a time when fresh produce is as seasonal as it gets, preserving food isn't just a skill, but a survival tactic. Pickling, salting, and drying transform yesterday's bounty into tomorrow's staple, ensuring that the pantry remains stocked through the lean months. These methods aren't just culinary curiosities. They're the ancestors of today's artisanal food trends, proving that everything old is new again. Meanwhile, the cook takes stock of the pantry, assessing the inventory with the precision of a quartermaster preparing for battle. Spices, those precious commodities we've waxed poetic about, are counted and recounted, their scarcity a constant reminder of the economic dance that defines Tudor life. Every decision is a calculated risk, a balancing act between indulgence and necessity. This isn't just about feeding the household, it's about maintaining a delicate equilibrium in a world where one bad harvest could send you spiraling into debt. As the final embers fade and the kitchen falls silent, it's tempting to romanticize the life of a Tudor cook, to imagine the kitchen as a place of creative expression and culinary mastery. But let's not get carried away. The reality is far more complex, a tapestry woven from threads of hard work, ingenuity, and a fair amount of grit. These cooks are the unsung heroes of their time, laboring away in the shadows to sustain not just their households, but in a very real sense, the entire societal structure. And what about those enduring myths of Tudor cuisine? While the image of opulent feasts persists, the truth is a much humbler affair. Yes, there were grand banquets with tables groaning under the weight of peacock pies and sugared delights, but those were the exception, not the rule. The daily reality was one of pottage and bread, of stretching ingredients and budgets to their limits. It was a life defined by necessity, where creativity was born out of constraint, and where every meal was a testament to the resilience of those who prepared it. Yet, in many ways, the Tudor kitchen laid the groundwork for modern culinary practices. Techniques refined through years of trial and error form the basis of cooking methods still in use today. The emphasis on local, seasonal ingredients, a necessity for the Tudors, is now a rallying cry for chefs seeking authenticity and sustainability. And while we've traded open hearths for induction cooktops, the spirit of innovation and adaptation remains unchanged, a legacy passed down through generations. As you sit back and reflect on this day in the life of a Tudor cook, take a moment to appreciate the paradoxes of history, how the past continues to shape our present, how myths and realities intertwine to create a narrative as rich and complex as the spice-laden dishes of old. The Tudor kitchen, with all its triumphs and tribulations, is more than just a relic of history. It's a reminder of the enduring human spirit, the drive to create and sustain even in the face of adversity. So here's to you, intrepid journeyer through time and taste, as you raise a glass of ale, naturally, to the hard-working cooks of Tudor England. Remember that their story is, in many ways, our own. It's a story of survival and ingenuity, of the everyday heroism that keeps the world turning. And as you savor the flavors of history, take comfort in the knowledge that, despite the centuries that separate us, we share more in common with our ancestors than we might think. Cheers to the cooks of yore, and to the lessons they've left us, a legacy as rich and rewarding as the meals they so painstakingly prepared. in the bustling heart of early 17th century Japan, where life was as unpredictable as a reality TV plot twist. A young woman named Izumo no Okuni strutted onto the stage and changed entertainment forever. It was 1603, and Okuni wasn't just breaking the fourth wall. She was bulldozing through it with a shimmy and a swagger that would make even the most seasoned TikTok influencer blush. She didn't have a fancy theater or a script penned by Shakespeare. She had a dry riverbed in Kyoto and a flair for the dramatic. The audience, a motley crew of merchants, samurai, and commoners, all eager for a break from the rigid social hierarchy that was as flexible as a lead pipe. Okuni's performance was an intoxicating cocktail of dance, drama, and dare we say, a sprinkle of scandal. She mixed traditional Japanese dance with her own flamboyant style, creating a spectacle that was both shocking and irresistible. Her all-female troupe donned men's clothing, which was about as controversial as serving sushi in a steakhouse. But the audience lapped it up, and soon enough, the word kabuki, from kabuku, meaning to lean or to be outlandish, became synonymous with this groundbreaking form of theater. The timing couldn't have been better. The Edo period was just getting started, and Japan was locking itself down tighter than a smartphone's parental controls. The ruling Tokugawa shogunate had just unified the country, and they had a penchant for order and control that would put a drill sergeant to shame. Social classes were defined with the precision of a bonsai gardener's shears. Samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. Everyone knew their place, and venturing outside those lines was about as advisable as taunting a sumo wrestler. But kabuki was the great equalizer, a social mixer where class lines blurred like a watercolor in the rain. It wasn't just a performance, it was an experience, a raucous blend of art and anarchy. The early days of kabuki saw all-female troupes dominating the stage, and the chaos they unleashed was like a theatrical hurricane. Audiences were riveted, and the authorities were horrified. The performances were a bit too lively, with audience participation that extended beyond applause and became more of a full-contact sport. In 1629, the government banned women from performing kabuki altogether, citing moral concerns. It was an early example of cancel culture, 17th century style. Despite the crackdown, kabuki's popularity soared. The performances were a mirror reflecting the political and cultural tensions of Edo Japan. While the shogunate worked tirelessly to maintain social order, kabuki danced on the edge of chaos, challenging norms and expectations. It was a place where merchants could rub elbows with samurai, where fantasy and reality entwined like lovers in a scandalous affair. The theater became a battleground for cultural expression, where every performance was a subtle rebellion against the rigid societal structure. The rise of kabuki was a testament to the power of art to transcend boundaries and defy conventions. It provided a vivid escape from the monotony of everyday life, offering audiences a taste of freedom in a world where freedom was as rare as a snowstorm in July. The theater thrived on the energy of its performers and the enthusiasm of its audiences, creating a dynamic that was both exhilarating and unpredictable. Each performance was a unique event, with the potential for magic or mayhem, depending on the night. In this charged atmosphere, kabuki evolved, adapting to the changing times and tastes of its audience. As women were barred from the stage, young boys were recruited to take their place, adding a new layer of complexity and controversy to the performances. These anagata, or female role specialists, became central to kabuki's appeal, mastering the art of embodying femininity with a precision that was both revered and scrutinized. This shift marked a new chapter in kabuki's history, one that would see it grow from a cultural upstart to a cornerstone of Japanese theater. The allure of kabuki lay not just in its theatricality, but in its ability to reflect the human condition in all its glory and absurdity. It was a theater of the people, for the people, that spoke to the heart of a nation in flux. Through its bold performances and daring narratives, kabuki captured the imagination of a society caught between tradition and change, providing a stage where anything was possible and everything was permissible. As the Edo period unfolded, kabuki continued to captivate and challenge, a testament to the enduring power of art to inspire and provoke. So, the stage was set for a dramatic shift, not just in the casting, but in the very essence of kabuki. With women officially banned from performing in 1629, Kabuki had to reinvent itself faster than a chameleon at a tie-dye party. Enter the Anagata, the male actors who took on the challenge of portraying female roles with such finesse that they turned societal norms on their head. These performers weren't just cross-dressing. They were crafting an art form within an art form, a meta-performance that required mastering the subtle nuances of femininity in a way that made audiences forget their gender entirely. The Anagata became the poster boys for Kabuki, their performances a masterclass in illusion and skill. They perfected everything from the graceful flick of a fan to the demure tilt of the head, embodying a femininity that was both idealized and, ironically, male-defined. This wasn't just a gender-bending spectacle. It was an exploration of identity and expression that resonated deeply with audiences. In a society where everyone had a prescribed role and deviation was discouraged, the Anagata offered a tantalizing glimpse of fluidity. Meanwhile, the economic landscape of Kabuki was booming like a 17th century stock market on Red Bull. The merchant class, those savvy middlemen of Edo society, were quick to spot a lucrative opportunity. With Japan's urban centers growing as fast as a modern tech hub, merchants had both money to burn and a thirst for entertainment. Kabuki, with its vibrant performances and rebellious spirit, was the perfect investment. They poured cash into productions like it was going out of style, funding elaborate sets, dazzling costumes, and the kind of special effects that would make a Hollywood director swoon. These productions weren't cheap thrills, though. A single Kabuki spectacle could cost the equivalent of a modern indie film budget. We're talking about lavish kimonos made from silk that could bankrupt a small village, and elaborate stage contraptions that would put Rube Goldberg to shame. But the returns, oh, they were sweeter than Marchai on a summer's day. Successful shows attracted crowds as vast as the cherry blossoms in full bloom, generating profits that kept the merchant class grinning like Cheshire cats. In this vibrant and profitable ecosystem, Kabuki thrived, becoming more than just a form of entertainment. It was a cultural phenomenon, a mirror to the social tensions bubbling beneath the surface of Edo, Japan. While the shogunate was busy crafting a society where everyone stayed in their neat little lane, Kabuki was the chaotic highway where rules were more like suggestions. Audiences from different social classes found themselves seated side by side, sharing a laugh, a gasp, or an impromptu debate about the merits of the latest performance. This was the ironic twist of Kabuki's tale, a rigid society utterly captivated by an art form that was anything but. The Tokugawa shogunate, with its obsession for order and control, couldn't help but be drawn to the very thing it sought to suppress. Kabuki was a paradox, a rebellious escape that thrived within the very constraints it challenged. It was as if society itself had a rebellious streak, manifesting in the vibrant, anarchic world of the theater. The merchant class, often regarded as the underdogs of Edo's social hierarchy, suddenly found themselves in a position of cultural influence. Through Kabuki, they wielded a subtle power, shaping public tastes and driving the entertainment economy. It was a kind of poetic justice. The class that was looked down upon for their focus on profit and trade became the patrons of the most daring and popular art form of the era. All the while, the Anagata continued to enchant and provoke, their performances a reminder of the fluidity and complexity of human identity. They became celebrities in their own right, their fame, and allure transcending the traditional boundaries of gender and class. In a world obsessed with categorization, they were walking, talking contradictions, challenging assumptions, and opening minds with every performance. As Kabuki continued to evolve, it maintained its place at the heart of Japanese culture, a testament to the enduring power of art to reflect the human experience in all its messy, glorious complexity. Each performance was a new chapter in a never-ending story, a chance for audiences to escape their everyday lives and explore the infinite possibilities of a world where anything could happen. And as the story of Kabuki unfolded, it left us with lessons that resonate to this day, about the power of art to challenge authority, the potential for change within rigid systems, and the enduring appeal of a good performance. In the next part of Kabuki's tale, we'll dive deeper into the evolution of the art form, the growing complexity of its narratives, and the continued influence of the Anagata as icons of theatrical innovation. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the vibrant, rebellious spirit of Edo's most captivating spectacle, a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand a society is through the stories it tells. In the bustling world of Edo, Japan, Kabuki wasn't just content with shaking up social norms and gender roles. It was also busy reinventing the very spaces where these dramas unfolded. Picture a 17th century urban landscape where Kabuki theaters began popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, becoming the social hubs of their day. These weren't just places to catch a show. They were the multiplexes of their era, minus the overpriced popcorn and sticky floors. Instead, they offered a heady mix of spectacle, socializing, and a dash of the scandalous. These architectural marvels were something to behold. Think grand wooden structures with seating arrangements as complex as the plot of a soap opera. Theaters like the Nakamura-za, Ikamura-za, and Morita-za dominated the Edo landscape, each vying for the title of the most elaborate and crowded venue. By the mid-1600, the Nakamura-za was packing in audiences like sardines in a bento box, boasting capacities of over 500 eager theater-goers. That's more than a small village worth of people crammed into one space, all ready to be entertained with the kind of dramatic flair that only Kabuki could deliver. The theaters themselves were a testament to the innovation and creativity of the period. They featured revolving stages and trap doors, the technological wonders of their time, which allowed for seamless scene changes that would make even the slickest Broadway production blush with envy. These innovations were the CGI of the Edo period, transforming the stage into a dynamic, ever-changing canvas. It was an era where wooden gears and human ingenuity worked together to create magic, a time when stager hands were the unsung heroes of the drama, pulling the strings behind the scenes, literally. The stagecraft of Kabuki was nothing short of revolutionary. Take the Maori Burai, or revolving stage, for instance. Introduced in the 18th century, it was a circular platform that allowed entire scenes to be switched out with a simple push, turning a domestic setting into a battlefield in the blink of an eye. And then there were the seri, or trap doors, which allowed actors to appear and disappear like phantoms, adding an element of surprise that kept audiences on the edge of their tatami mats. These innovations didn't just enhance the storytelling, they were integral to it, a precursor to the special effects that dominate our screens today. But the magic of Kabuki wasn't just in the technical wizardry. It was also in the stories and the stars that brought them to life. Kabuki plays were rich tapestries of history, mythology, and everyday life, woven together with a flair for the dramatic. They featured tales of love, betrayal, and revenge, played out by larger-than-life characters that audiences couldn't get enough of. And at the center of it all were the actors, the celebrities of their time, who commanded attention both on and off the stage. One such star was Ikikawa Denjiro Ai, the original bad boy of Kabuki. Born in 1660, Denjiro was the Marlon Brando of Edo, Japan, known for his dynamic performances and intense stage presence. He was a trailblazer, creating the Aragoto style, literally rough style, which emphasized exaggerated movements and dramatic facial expressions. Denjiro's portrayal of samurai and heroes was so compelling that he became a cultural icon, with fans as devoted as any modern-day pop stars following. And then there was Nakamura Kanzaburo, a name synonymous with the Nakamura-za theater. Born in 1598, Kanzaburo was both an actor and a shrewd businessman, pioneering the development of Kabuki's theatrical infrastructure. He was a visionary, transforming the Nakamura-za into a premier venue that set the standard for Kabuki theaters across the country. His legacy continued through his descendants, who carried the torch of innovation and excellence, making the Nakamura name one of the most respected in Kabuki history. These actors weren't just performing, they were crafting identities that transcended the stage. Their influence extended into the cultural and social fabric of the time, with fans mimicking their styles and mannerisms, an early form of celebrity culture that laid the groundwork for the fan phenomena we see today. In fact, some actors even had their own merchandise, with fans collecting prints and memorabilia like 17th century trading cards. It was a testament to the power of Kabuki to captivate and inspire, transcending its role as mere entertainment to become a cornerstone of cultural identity. Yet, amidst all this glamour and innovation, the harsh realities of Edo society were never far from view. The theatres, while spaces of artistic freedom, were also tightly regulated by the shogunate, who kept a watchful eye on content and conduct. The government was wary of Kabuki's potential to influence public opinion and stir dissent, and they weren't above imposing strict censorship when things got a little too rebellious for comfort. It was a delicate dance between creativity and control, a game of cat and mouse that saw theatres occasionally shut down or actors punished for stepping out of line. Despite these challenges, Kabuki thrived, fueled by the insatiable appetite of a public hungry for stories that resonated with their own experiences. It was an art form that spoke to the universal themes of love, honor, and the human condition, wrapped in the vibrant colors and dynamic movements that define the genre. As the Edo period progressed, Kabuki continued to evolve, adapting to the changing tastes and sensibilities of its audience, a testament to its resilience and enduring appeal. In this swirling mix of artistry and ambition, Kabuki theaters became more than just venues. They were cultural landmarks, places where the boundaries of class and convention blurred like a smudged ink painting. They were spaces where merchants, samurai, and commoners could come together, united by the shared experience of a Kabuki performance. It was a rare opportunity for social interaction that transcended the rigid hierarchies of Edo society, offering a glimpse of a world where the lines between status and identity were not so clearly drawn. As we continue to unravel the story of Kabuki, it's clear that this theatrical tradition was more than just an escape from the everyday. It was a reflection of the society that birthed it, a living, breathing testament to the complexities and contradictions of human nature. The theaters, the innovations, the actors, all played a part in crafting a narrative that still resonates with us today, a reminder of the power of art to connect, challenge, and transform. And so, the tale of Kabuki marches on, with more twists and turns than a Kabuki plot. In the next installment, we'll delve deeper into the narratives and themes that define this vibrant art form, exploring how Kabuki continued to captivate and compel audiences throughout the Edo period and beyond. For now, let's leave the curtain drawn on this chapter, savoring the rich tapestry of history and drama that Kabuki has woven, a legacy as enduring and dynamic as the performances themselves. As we peel back the layers of Kabuki's colorful history, it becomes clear that the enthralling spectacle on stage was only part of the story. Behind the swirling silk and meticulously painted faces, the Tokugawa shogunate played the role of an overzealous stage manager, periodically storming the wings to impose their own brand of order. They viewed Kabuki as an unruly child, a source of moral corruption and potential political subversion that needed a firm hand, much like a 17th century version of what parents might think about TikTok today. The shogunate's periodic crackdowns were as predictable as a reality TV elimination round, but with far more dramatic consequences. In their quest to sanitize entertainment, they banned women from the stage in 1629, only to find that the replacement system of young boys, some as young as 7, didn't exactly quell the moral panic. The authorities soon realized they were caught in a cultural whack-a-mole, where every attempt to suppress Kabuki only led to more elaborate and creative expressions of theatrical rebellion. It was as if the shogunate had unwittingly handed Kabuki a challenge. Find a way to thrive under constraints or fade into obscurity. But thrive it did. Like any good drama, restrictions only added layers to the plot, fueling innovation and pushing the art form into new territories. The limitations imposed by the government became a crucible for creativity. Faced with censorship, Kabuki playwrights and actors crafted allegories and coded narratives that flew under the radar of the censors, allowing them to comment on social and political issues while maintaining plausible deniability. It was a game of cat and mouse, with scripts often containing double meanings and allegorical references that audiences devoured with the enthusiasm of a detective unraveling a mystery. Yet, while the audience was captivated by these clever narratives, the actors were juggling more than just lines and roles. Enter the commercial pressures of the Kabuki world, a world where the spotlight was both a blessing and a curse. The demand for fresh performances was relentless, and actors often found themselves trapped in grueling schedules that would make a modern-day workaholic break out in a cold sweat. Rehearsals were intense, with actors spending more time perfecting their craft than a college student cramming for finals. And the performances, they could stretch on for hours, sometimes from sunrise to sunset, leaving actors with barely enough time to catch their breath, let alone a decent night's sleep. And let's not forget the contracts, which were less fair trade and more Faustian bargain. Actors signed on to agreements that were as binding as a samurai's oath, often with little room for negotiation. The terms were exploitative, with theater managers holding the upper hand, dictating not just the roles but the very lives of the performers. These contracts bound actors to a single theater for years, sometimes even decades, effectively turning them into theatrical serfs. The promise of fame came with a steep price tag, one that often included personal sacrifice and little financial reward. Even the star performers, the celebrities of their time, went immune to the darker side of fame. While their faces adorned prints and fans, and their performances drew crowds larger than a festival day in Kyoto, their personal lives were often as turbulent as the dramas they enacted. The notoriety that came with being an anagata or a leading actor was a double-edged sword. Sure, it brought adoration and status, but it also meant living under the constant scrutiny of an audience eager for gossip and scandal. It was like living under a magnifying glass, with every misstep and personal flaw magnified for public consumption. And amid these pressures, Kabuki actors had to navigate the murky waters of patronage. Wealthy merchants and patrons were the financial lifeblood of the theaters, ensuring productions had the resources to dazzle. But this patronage came with strings attached, often in the form of personal favors or social obligations. It was a delicate dance where maintaining favor with the right people could make or break a career. This relationship was a reminder that beneath the artistic veneer, Kabuki was a business, and like any business, it was driven by profit and the whims of those with deep pockets. The myth of Kabuki as a purely artistic endeavor crumbles under the weight of these practical realities. The theaters were businesses, and like any successful enterprise, they were subject to the pressures of supply and demand. The need to fill seats and cater to audience tastes meant that artistic integrity often had to jostle for space with commercial interests. The result was a constant balancing act, with theater owners and performers alike striving to maintain the delicate equilibrium between creative expression and financial viability. But here's the kicker. It was this very tension that fueled Kabuki's evolution, pushing it to adapt and innovate in ways that kept it fresh and relevant for centuries. The commercial pressures, the governmental crackdowns, and the social constraints were paradoxically the catalysts for Kabuki's enduring vitality. They forced the art form to remain nimble, to constantly redefine itself in response to the changing landscape of Edo society. It was a testament to the resilience of human creativity, the ability to find new paths in the face of obstacles. And so, the tale of Kabuki continued, a dance between art and commerce, rebellion and conformity. It was a reflection of Edo Japan itself, a society wrangling with its own contradictions and complexities. As we delve further into the story, we'll see how these themes played out in the narratives and characters that defined Kabuki's golden era, and how the legacy of this vibrant art form continues to captivate and challenge us today. So, stay tuned for the next act in this theatrical saga, where we'll explore the intricate plots and rich characters that emerged from this dynamic period, along with the enduring influence of Kabuki on Japanese culture and beyond. For now, let's take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance of history and art, a testament to the power of storytelling to illuminate the past and inspire the future. Kabuki's journey from rebellious riverbank performances to the cultural darling of Edo Japan is like a rags-to-riches story, but with more silk and less sentimentality. As we leap from the 17th century to the present, it's fascinating to see how Kabuki has kept its grip on the cultural zeitgeist, both within Japan and beyond. It's like the theatrical equivalent of a rock band that just won't quit, reinventing itself with every new generation while keeping the rebellious spirit that first captivated audiences centuries ago. In modern Japan, Kabuki is revered as a national treasure, Its performances a blend of tradition and innovation. It's like a living museum where ancient art comes to life, but without the dust and please do not touch signs. Today, kabuki theaters like the famous Kabukiza in Tokyo still pack in crowds, drawing audiences who are as eager for a glimpse of history as they are for a 3-hour escape from reality. And let's not kid ourselves. The kimonos are still breathtaking, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship, complete with colors so vibrant they could rival a Pantone chart. But kabuki's influence doesn't stop at the theater doors. Its impact has seeped into various facets of contemporary Japanese culture, from the stylized action sequences in anime to the elaborate costumes and larger-than-life characters that define manga. It's no coincidence that anime heroes often strike poses as dramatic as any kabuki actor's mime, the exaggerated stance that screams, "Look at me, I'm the hero." It's a nod to kabuki's flair for the dramatic, a stylistic imprint that echoes through the vibrant world of Japanese pop culture. Then there's the avant-garde theater scene, where kabuki's influence is as subtle as a neon sign. Modern directors borrow liberally from kabuki's playbook, experimenting with its elements to create new forms of theatrical expression. The intersection of tradition and modernity is nothing short of electric, a reminder that art doesn't exist in a vacuum, but is constantly evolving, drawing from its roots to forge new paths. It's like watching a master chef take a classic dish and give it a contemporary twist, keeping the essence but adding a dash of surprise. Internationally, kabuki has made its mark as well, its exotic allure captivating audiences worldwide. It's been featured in films, television, and even video games, where its aesthetic and narrative style add a layer of depth and intrigue. The global fascination with kabuki is part of a broader appreciation for Japanese culture, a testament to the power of art to transcend borders and bring people together. It's a cultural export that rivals sushi, anime, and dare we say, karaoke. Yet, for all its glamour and global reach, kabuki remains a reflection of the society that birthed it. It continues to grapple with the same themes of identity, class, and rebellion that defined it in the Edo period. In a world where celebrity culture reigns supreme, kabuki's exploration of fame and identity feels more relevant than ever. Today's audiences may not be huddled in wooden theaters, but they're just as captivated by the performances, drawn in by the promise of escape and the thrill of the unexpected. The enduring appeal of kabuki lies in its duality. It's both a celebration of tradition and a rebellion against it. It's a reminder that the most captivating stories are those that embrace complexity, acknowledging the messiness of the human condition while striving to transcend it. Kabuki is a dance between past and present, a testament to the resilience of art to adapt and survive in even the most challenging of circumstances. As we wrap up our journey through kabuki's storied past, it's worth taking a moment to appreciate the legacy it has left behind. It's a legacy that speaks to the power of art to challenge authority, to inspire change, and to connect us across time and space. Kabuki shows us that while the world may change, the human desire for storytelling, for connection, and for a little bit of drama remains constant. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand who we are is to look at the stories we tell and the stages upon which we tell them. So here's to Kabuki, the theatrical renegade that has defied time and convention to become a cornerstone of cultural identity. As the curtain falls on this chapter of history, it leaves us with a lesson that resonates through the ages. That art is not just a reflection of society, but a force that shapes it, challenges it, and ultimately defines it. It's another crisp morning in the Andean highlands, and you, an Inca warrior, are waking up to a world where the air is thin, the sun is merciless, and the stakes are high. The year is 1532, and while the rest of the world is busy getting tangled up in their own dramas, you've got the daily grind of an empire at your feet. Forget about hitting the snooze button. There's none of that when your alarm clock is the blaring conch shell calling you to duty. Your day kicks off with a bowl of chicha, a fermented corn beverage that's a bit like the Inca version of a strong morning coffee, minus the caffeine, but with a nice fermented kick. This isn't just breakfast, it's a social ritual. You share it with your fellow warriors, each sip a reminder of your place in the social hierarchy. You're not just any Joe Schmo in the empire. You're a warrior, part of the Sapa Inca's elite, the backbone of an empire that stretches over 500 miles along the spine of South America. That's roughly the distance from New York to Los Angeles, in case you're wondering. As you pull yourself together, it's worth noting that being an Inca warrior isn't just about swinging a macana, that fearsome wooden club, and looking fierce. There's a whole economic engine at work here, and you're one of its gears. The Inca Empire didn't run on coins or cash. Nope, it was all about reciprocity and redistribution. Imagine a massive, ancient version of a barter economy, with the Sapa Inca as the ultimate broker. You contribute your labor, in this case, risking life and limb, and in return, you get everything you need to survive. Food, clothing, weapons, you name it, all distributed according to your rank and role. Your gear, however, isn't just handed to you like a party favor. Those textiles you're wearing, they're not your average off-the-rack numbers. Chosen from the finest alpaca wool. They're woven by the Eclairs, the chosen women, and dyed in vibrant reds, yellows, and blues. Each color and pattern speaks to your rank and achievements. It's like wearing a flashy resume. But don't get too attached. These textiles are property of the state, on loan to keep you looking sharp while you serve. Speaking of sharp, your weapons are no joke either. Your macana, with its heavy wooden handle and star-shaped stone head, is a force to be reckoned with. And then there's your bow and arrows, a gift from the jungle tribes, each arrow tipped with a deadly mix of plant poisons. All of these tools are carefully crafted and distributed by the state, ensuring that you're well equipped to defend the Empire's borders. Because let's face it, the neighbors aren't exactly friendly. But before you rush off to defend the realm, there are rituals to perform. The Inca society is deeply spiritual, and as a warrior, you're not just fighting for land or glory, but for the gods themselves. Today you might offer a small sacrifice to Intai, the sun god, whose rays are warming your skin even now. Perhaps a guinea pig if you can catch one. It's not just for good luck, it's believed to ensure victory and protection. The Empire's social structure is another beast altogether. At the top, there's the Sapa Inca, the emperor himself, believed to be a direct descendant of Intai. Below him, the nobles, the curakas, who manage the various provinces. And then there's you, the Hanan, the warrior class. You're respected, sure, but don't let it get to your head. There's no room for slackers, and the Empire demands loyalty above all else. The meter, or labor tax, looms over you like a shadow. Everyone, from the highest noble to the humblest peasant, owes service to the state, and military service is your specialty. Your responsibilities aren't just about brawn, though. There's a brain game at play here, too. Inca warriors are trained in strategy and organization. You're expected to be as sharp with logistics as you are with a spear. After all, keeping an army fed, clothed, and ready to march is no small feat when you're dealing with the rugged terrain of the Andes. There are terraces to traverse, valleys to navigate, and the weather can turn from sunshine to snow faster than you can say, "Patcha-cutie." As you head out, you're reminded that the road network, the famous Quhapak Nyan, is your lifeline. It's over 25,000 miles of imperial highway, meticulously constructed and maintained. You can thank the Chasquis, the Empire's relay runners, for keeping communication swift across this vast expanse. These guys are the original marathoners, sprinting across the Andes with messages and orders while you're busy holding the line. By now, the sun is high, and it's time to join your fellow warriors in training. The Inca army is renowned for its discipline and unity. Each movement, each formation has been drilled into you through countless hours of practice. You're not just a fighter, you're part of a living, breathing war machine. And let me tell you, when that machine moves, it's like a tidal wave crashing through the highlands. But don't let the romance of warrior life fool you. The reality is gritty and tough. The Andean highlands are no picnic. Altitudes can reach over 30,000 feet, and the air is thinner than a politician's promise. You're constantly balancing on the edge of exhaustion, your lungs working overtime to keep up. It's a harsh environment, but it's also your home, and you wouldn't trade it for the world, or at least, not for anything less than a warm meal and a good night's sleep. As the day stretches on, you're reminded of your place in the grand scheme of things. The Inca Empire is a marvel of human organization and engineering, but it's also a testament to the power of belief. You're not just fighting for territory or treasure, you're part of something much larger. An intricate tapestry where every thread, every person, plays a critical role. So there you are, in the midst of the Andean highlands, a cog in the great wheel of the Inca Empire. It's a life of duty, of honor, and yes, of hardship. But it's also a life full of purpose, woven into the very fabric of history. And as the day unfolds, you're reminded that while the sun may set on another day, the legacy of your people is one that will endure. Now, grab your macana and get ready to show the world what it means to be an Inca warrior. Now, grab your macana and get ready to show the world what it means to be an Inca warrior. But before you take a swing, let's talk about what's really going on behind the scenes of your epic battle gear and that colorful resume of textiles. Being an Inca warrior isn't just about flexing your muscles and looking good in alpaca wool. It's a lifestyle, a calling, and believe me, it's as challenging as trying to get a llama to do your taxes. Training to become an Inca warrior is no walk in the park, or in this case, no stroll through the highland terraces. It's a rigorous process that starts young and leaves no room for slackers. Imagine a boot camp at 13,000 feet where the air is thin and the expectations are thicker than a quinoa stew. From a young age, you're thrust into a world of physical endurance, mental resilience, and strategic cunning. The Inca military machine is a well-oiled empire of its own, and you're expected to be a cog that never misses a beat. The training regime is designed to turn you into a human powerhouse, capable of marching for days on end across the Andes with nothing but a handful of chuño, freeze-dried potatoes, as fuel. Think of it as the original energy bar. Your instructors, seasoned warriors themselves, drill into you the importance of stamina, discipline, and the art of war. It's not just about brute strength. It's about enduring the harshest conditions. It's about waking up every morning and pushing your limits until your lungs feel like they're about to burst from the thin mountain air. But what about the mental game? You might be wondering how that fits in when you're spending your days swinging a macana. Well, the Incas understood that a warrior's mind needed sharpening just as much as his weapons. You're not just a foot soldier. You're a strategist. You learn to read the land like a book, using the natural landscape to your advantage. You're trained in the art of deception, learning to outsmart your enemies with tactics that would make Sun Tzu nod in approval, if he knew where the Andes were, of course. Now, let's take a step back and look at why you're putting yourself through all this. Why did the Incas invest so heavily in their military might? It wasn't just for the adrenaline rush or the chance to show off those fancy textiles. The empire had bigger fish to fry, or guinea pigs to roast, if you prefer. Political motivations behind the Inca military exploits were as multi-layered as a good Corsa Relina. At its height, the Inca Empire was a patchwork of different cultures, languages, and territories. The Sapa Inca needed an efficient military machine to maintain control over this vast and diverse domain. Expansion wasn't just about acquiring more land. It was about integrating new peoples and resources into the empire's fold. Each conquest brought fresh labor, new agricultural techniques, and valuable materials into the Inca economy. Think of it as the original mergers and acquisition strategy. This brings us to the economic implications. The Inca economy was as robust as a well-built stone wall, and military conquests were its cornerstone. When the Incas expanded their territory, they weren't just after glory. They were after the goods. New lands meant more resources, more workers for the Mida system, and more goods to redistribute across the empire. The Inca state was like a giant pulsing heart, pumping resources from conquered territories into the core and redistributing them to keep every part of the body alive and kicking. But let's not paint too rosy a picture here. Military conquest was no picnic. It was brutal, bloody, and often destructive. The romanticized vision of the noble warrior fighting for the glory of the empire is just one side of the coin. The reality was often harsh and unforgiving. Conquered peoples were integrated into the empire, yes, but they were also expected to pay their dues through labor and resources. It was a delicate balance of power and subjugation, unity and division. Now, about those elaborate systems that supported your training. Behind every warrior is a network of support that makes it all possible. The Inca state had its logistics down to a science. The Q-Hapak Nyan, or the Royal Road System, wasn't just for getting around. It was the lifeline that connected the empire's heart to its limbs. Along these roads were tampas, or way stations, strategically placed to provide food, rest, and resources for the troops. It was the ancient equivalent of a drive-through, serving up everything from chicha to weapons. And let's not forget the chasquis, those incredible relay runners who could sprint across the Andes faster than a rumor through a small town. These guys were the original FedEx, delivering messages, orders, and even fresh supplies to keep the military machine ticking. Without them, the Empire's communication lines would have been as tangled as a ball of llama wool. So there you are, in the thick of it all, a tiny but crucial part of the Inca's grand design. It's a demanding life, no doubt, filled with challenges that would make a Spartan warrior break a sweat. But it's also a life brimming with purpose and pride. You're not just a warrior. You're a testament to the power of human organization, ingenuity, and resilience. As the sun dips below the jagged horizon, you stand on the precipice of history, ready to defend your empire and all it stands for. The legacy of the Inca warrior is one of strength, endurance, and a relentless pursuit of unity. And while your story is far from over, you know that each step you take, each battle you fight, is another thread in the rich tapestry of the Inca Empire, a tapestry that continues to capture the imagination of the world. As the sun dips below the jagged horizon, you might think that the life of an Inca warrior is straight out of an epic saga, a tale spun with the finest threads of bravery and glory. Yet, as with most legends, reality is a bit more textured. So let's strip away the gilded veneer and peer into the nitty-gritty of what it really meant to be a warrior in the world's most formidable high-altitude empire. First off, let's tackle the myth of the unstoppable Inca warrior, a narrative so deeply woven into the empire's fabric that it might as well be part of your alpaca wool tunic. The Inca military prowess is often romanticized as an unyielding force, steamrolling across the Andes like a landslide in rainy season. But here's the kicker. Despite their formidable reputation, the Incas didn't rely solely on brute force. They were masters of psychological warfare and diplomacy. Sometimes they won battles before even unsheathing a single tumi. Take the quipu, for instance. This knotted string device wasn't just an ancient spreadsheet for keeping tabs on quinoa stalks. It was also a tool for communication and propaganda. Imagine receiving a quipu that not so subtly hinted at the Empire's might, encouraging your little corner of the Andes to join the winning team, or else. It's a classic case of join us or face the consequences, without ever having to raise a club. But let's not kid ourselves. When diplomacy failed, things got messy. The Incas were strategic in their brutality. One could argue it was a necessary evil to maintain control over an empire sprawling across 500 miles and encompassing millions of subjects. We're talking about a population of around 10 million at its peak, scattered across diverse and often inhospitable landscapes. The Sapa Inca couldn't exactly send out a mass email to ensure compliance, so a show of force often did the trick. Yet, the romantic vision of the noble Inca warrior is often more appealing than the grim reality. It's easy to get swept up in tales of warriors clad in vibrant feathers and wielding weapons that glint in the sun. But let's face it, when you're dodging sling stones and spears, the shine wears off pretty quickly. And let's talk about those sling stones. These weren't your garden variety pebbles. In the hands of an experienced warrior, they could crack skulls from 200 yards away. Reality check. Being on the receiving end of a sling stone is less epic adventure and more immediate headache. And let's not forget the challenges posed by the Andean terrain. The highlands are breathtakingly beautiful, but also brutally unforgiving. Marching at altitudes that can surpass 13,000 feet is no small feat. Your lungs work overtime, your muscles scream for oxygen, and the weather can turn on a dime. 1 minute you're basking in the sun, the next you're caught in a snowstorm. It's like Mother Nature decided to throw every obstacle your way just for kicks. Now, let's delve into the role of propaganda in maintaining the empire's image. The Incas were masters at crafting their legacy, both to intimidate potential adversaries and to inspire loyalty among their subjects. The Sapa Inca himself was considered a living god, a direct descendant of Intai, the sun god. This divine connection wasn't just a perk of the job. It was crucial for maintaining the social order and ensuring the loyalty of the masses. The empire's founders understood the power of myth and spectacle. Consider the elaborate festivals and rituals designed to reinforce the divine right of the Sapa Inca and the invincibility of his warriors. These events were less about religious devotion and more about political theater, showcasing the empire's might and unity. Imagine the psychological impact of witnessing thousands of warriors moving in perfect unison, a living testament to the empire's strength. Yet, reality often diverged from the propaganda. Life, as an Inca warrior, was fraught with hardships that no amount of mythologizing could erase. The constant threat of rebellion, the harshness of the terrain, and the ever-present specter of death were as much a part of your daily existence as the rituals and pageantry. It's a bit like realizing the glamorous Hollywood life involves a lot of waiting around for your big break, except with more chances of getting speared. Analyzing primary sources, like the Spanish Chronicles, gives us glimpses into these gritty realities. But remember, these accounts often come with a side of bias. The Spanish chroniclers, both fascinated and horrified by the Inca civilization they encountered, sometimes embellished their tales to suit their narratives. It's like reading a tabloid and trying to separate the celebrity gossip from the actual news. You get a sense of the truth, but it's buried under layers of hyperbole and cultural misunderstanding. So, as you stand amidst the Andean peaks, armed with your macana and the weight of an empire on your shoulders, you're not just a warrior in a grand saga. You're a complex figure navigating a world where myth and reality intertwine as tightly as the fibers in your tunic. You fight not just for land or glory, but for the survival of a way of life that's as enduring as the mountains themselves. The story of the Inca warrior is one of contradictions and complexities, a blend of legend and harsh truths. It's a tale that captures the imagination, even as it challenges us to look beyond the romantic veneer and see the reality of life and death on the front line of history. And while this chapter of your story is far from over, legacy you helped forge will echo through the ages, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of a people who dared to carve an empire out of the clouds. Standing amidst this blend of myth and reality, the Inca warrior embodies the dualities of an empire that mastered the art of warfare and governance with a deftness that would make Machiavelli nod approvingly. But hold on. Before we get too swept away by the grandeur, let's strap on our sandals and hit the Quhapac Nyan, the lifeblood of the Inca Empire's military might. This road system stretched over 25,000 miles, a feat of engineering that makes the Roman roads look like amateur hour. Picture this: stone-paved pathways winding through the Andes, traversing deserts, valleys, and mountains like veins pumping life across an empire. Without these roads, the Inca might as well have been shouting across chasms like a game of telephone gone terribly wrong. Now, let's talk logistics, the unsung hero of any military campaign. The Inca military was a marvel of organization, a testament to what you can achieve with a bit of strategic ingenuity and a lot of communal labor. The empire didn't have the luxury of a sprawling bureaucracy or the abundance of resources that their Eurasian counterparts enjoyed. Instead, they relied on a system of reciprocity and redistribution, like an ancient socialist dream with a militaristic twist. The Mida labor system was the backbone, ensuring that every able-bodied subject contributed to the empire, whether by building roads, farming terraces, or crafting weapons. It was a well-oiled machine, and as an Inca warrior, you were a crucial cog in this grand design. Speaking of weapons, let's dive into the Incan arsenal. Forget about the clunky, unwieldy swords of Europe. The Incas perfected the art of efficiency. The macana, with its star-shaped stone head, was the epitome of simplicity and lethality. It was the Swiss army knife of the Andes, capable of bashing through armor and bone with equal ease. Then there were the bowlers, those deceptively simple throwing weapons that could trip up an opponent faster than you could say, "Patcha cutie." Not to mention the slings, which in the hands of a skilled warrior were as deadly as any crossbow. Hurling stones with pinpoint accuracy, they added a new dimension to the Incas' tactical repertoire. Armor, on the other hand, was a different beast. The Incas didn't rely on heavy metal suits like their European contemporaries. Instead, they crafted tunics padded with cotton or layers of quilted cloth, offering flexibility and a surprising amount of protection. It's no full-plate armor, but when you're scrambling up the steep slopes of Machu Picchu, mobility trumps invincibility. And those vibrant textiles, they weren't just for show. Each pattern and color was a status symbol, a reminder to friend and foe alike of your place in the grand hierarchy. But let's not gloss over the strategic brilliance that held this empire together. The Incas were consummate strategists, leveraging every advantage that their rugged homeland offered. They understood that the Andes were both ally and enemy. They used the geography to their advantage, positioning troops in high-altitude fortresses like Sacsayhuaman, where a handful of warriors could hold off an entire army. It was like building a fortress in the clouds, where the thin air and steep cliffs did half the work for you. And here's where the myth-busting comes in. The Incas knew that sheer force wasn't always the answer. Their approach to warfare was as much about psychological dominance as it was about physical conquest. They'd often send emissaries to neighboring tribes with gifts and promises of alliance, backed by the not-so-subtle threat of force. It was diplomacy with a side of mace-wielding persuasion. The message was clear: join or be crushed. It's the kind of offer that's hard to refuse when faced with an empire that seems to stretch to the ends of the earth. But all this conquest and expansion came with a social price tag. Constant warfare had a profound impact on Inca society and culture. It wasn't just about expanding borders. It was a way of life that permeated every aspect of existence. The relentless push for expansion meant that every member of society had a role to play, from the warriors at the front lines to the éclats weaving the textiles that would clothe them. It was a society built on the principle of collective effort, where the individual was but a thread in the empire's grand tapestry. Yet with every victory, the strain on resources grew. The Inca economy, while robust, had its limits. The mirror system ensured a steady supply of labor, but it also placed immense pressure on the peasantry, who bore the brunt of the empire's demands. The social contract was clear: loyalty and labor in exchange for protection and provision. But as the empire expanded, so too did the cracks in this carefully constructed facade. The constant need for new resources and labor created a cycle of expansion that was as unsustainable as it was relentless. Culturally, the impacts of war were just as significant. The warrior ethos became enshrined in Inca society, a testament to the importance of military might in maintaining the empire's cohesion. Festivals and rituals celebrated martial prowess, reinforcing the centrality of the warrior class in the social hierarchy. This glorification of war also masked the harsh realities faced by those at the sharp end of the spear. The romantic image of the noble warrior often overshadowed the grim reality of life on the battlefield, where death was a constant companion and glory was often fleeting. And here's the kicker: despite the empire's might, it was ultimately undone not by external enemies, but by internal strife. The very systems that had propelled the Incas to greatness became their Achilles' heel. The reliance on centralized control, the constant need for expansion, and the rigid social structure created vulnerabilities that would be exploited by the Spanish conquistadors. The arrival of the Spanish was like a storm sweeping through the Andes, capitalizing on divisions and weaknesses that had been brewing beneath the surface. But that's a story for another time. For now, as the sun sets over the Andean peaks, you stand as a testament to an empire that dared to dream of glory amidst the clouds. Your journey is far from over, and the legacy of the Inca warrior will continue to unfold in the chapters to come. Until then, keep your macana close, your wits sharper, and remember, history is as much about the battles fought as it is about the stories we tell. The legacy of the Inca warrior is as much a tale of triumph as it is of tragedy, saga that reveals the fickle nature of power and the inexorable march of history. But as the sun dips below the Andes and shadows stretch long over the empire, a new chapter looms on the horizon. And to the Spanish conquistadors, a ragtag band of adventurers and opportunists whose arrival in the early 16th century would spell the beginning of the end for the mighty Inca Empire. Now, if you were expecting a grand clash of titans, prepare for a plot twist. The conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, weren't exactly rolling in with an army to rival the Incas' might. In fact, Pizarro's initial foray in 1532 boasted a mere 168 men, 27 horses, and a few cannons. Yet these were no ordinary men. They were armed with steel, gunpowder, and a ruthless ambition that would make even the most hardened Inca warrior blanch. It's like showing up to a knife fight with a bazooka. But the Spanish didn't just waltz in and take over. They had a little help from the empire's own cracks, which were already starting to show. By this point, the Inca Empire was embroiled in a brutal civil war sparked by the death of Huayna Capac, the last great Sapa Inca, from smallpox, a disease as foreign to the Andes as the men who brought it. His sons, Atahualpa and Huascar were locked in a power struggle that left the empire divided and weakened. It's like watching two siblings squabble over the TV remote while the house is on fire. This internal strife was a golden opportunity for Pizarro, who played both sides like a master puppeteer. In 1532, he captured Atahualpa in an audacious ambush at Cajamarca, a move that's gone down in history as the ultimate bait-and switch. Atahualpa, confident in his numerical superiority, walked into the trap with an entourage of thousands, only to find himself outmaneuvered by a handful of Spaniards armed with guns and steel. It's a classic case of overconfidence meeting cold, hard reality. With Atahualpa in chains, Pizarro demanded a ransom that would make a billionaire blush, a room filled with gold and 2 of silver. The Incas, true to their word, delivered the treasure, a staggering 24 tons of precious metal. But in a brutal twist, Pizarro executed Atahualpa anyway, proving that in the cutthroat world of conquest, honor is often as expendable as last year's fashion. The execution of Atahualpa was not just the death of a man, but the extinguishing of a divine lineage, a seismic shift that left the empire reeling. The fall of the Inca Empire was swift and brutal. With their leadership decapitated and the empire fractured by civil war, the remaining Inca forces were no match for the Spanish, who exploited these divisions with Machiavellian efficiency. By the time Pizarro entered the Inca capital of Cusco in 1533, the empire was effectively in Spanish hands. It's a sobering reminder of how quickly fortunes can change when the winds of fate blow cold. Yet, the story doesn't end there. The Spanish conquest wasn't just a military victory. It was a cultural and economic upheaval that reshaped the Andean world. The introduction of European diseases, to which the indigenous population had no immunity, decimated the population, with estimates suggesting a decline of up to 90% in some areas. This demographic collapse was as devastating as any battle, stripping the empire of its lifeblood and leaving a void that the Spanish were all too eager to fill. Economically, the Spanish dismantled the Incas' sophisticated system of reciprocity and redistribution, replacing it with a colonial economy driven by the extraction of silver and gold. The once thriving communal agriculture and middle labor systems were supplanted by encomiendas, a feudal system that reduced the indigenous population to serfdom. It was as if someone had taken the Incas' meticulously crafted economic engine and smashed it with a sledgehammer, replacing it with a model that prioritized profit over sustainability. Socially, the Spanish conquest imposed a rigid caste system that relegated the indigenous population to the bottom rung of society. The Sapa Inca's divine authority was supplanted by the Spanish crown, and the intricate social hierarchy that had held the empire together was flattened under the weight of colonial rule. The vibrant tapestry of Inca culture was gradually unraveled, its threads repurposed to serve a new master. Yet, despite the cataclysmic changes, the legacy of the Inca warriors endures. Their military system, with its emphasis on discipline, logistics, and strategy, laid the groundwork for future resistance movements and continues to inspire modern perceptions of the Andean peoples. The Incas' knack for organization and their ability to harness the harsh Andean environment remain a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire is a complex tale of power, betrayal, and transformation. It's a story that challenges us to look beyond the romanticized narratives and confront the harsh realities of history. The Inca warriors, once the embodiment of imperial might, became symbols of a lost world, their legacy living on in the cultural memory of the Andean peoples. As we wrap up this journey through the world of the Inca warrior, we're reminded that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a tapestry of human experiences, woven together in patterns that are often as unpredictable as they are intricate. The rise and fall of the Inca Empire is a story of ambition and hubris, of resilience and adaptation. It's a tale that speaks to the enduring power of human creativity and the indelible mark that even the most fleeting of empires can leave on the world. So as the sun sets on the Andes, casting long shadows over the ruins of what was once the greatest empire in the Americas, take a moment to reflect on the lessons of the past. The story of the Inca warriors is one of both triumph and tragedy, a reminder that while empires may rise and fall, the spirit of those who built them endures. etched into the mountains, whispered by the winds, and remembered in the stories we tell. In the humid, verdant heart of what we now call the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the Olmecs were busy laying the groundwork for Mesoamerica's first major civilization. Around 1600 BCE, when the rest of the world was either figuring out the wheel or perfecting the art of eyebrow-raising pyramid schemes in Egypt, the Olmecs were already elbow-deep in the muck of progress. And yes, they did it all while swatting off clouds of mosquitoes that could give modern-day repellents a run for their money. Nestled in the regions of what are now Veracruz and Tabasco, the Olmec civilization thrived amidst thick tropical forests and riverine landscapes. Picture an environment that's equal parts National Geographic special and mosquito sanctuary. It's here that the Olmecs harnessed the power of the land, transforming it from a bug-infested paradise into the cradle of a burgeoning society. Their secret? Corn. Okay, maybe not just corn, but it was a big deal. Maize agriculture allowed them to support large populations, who in turn built bustling urban centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. But let's not just gloss over those city names as if they were minor stops on a forgotten tour bus route. San Lorenzo was the Olmec capital from around 1200 BCE to 900 BCE, a sprawling hub that witnessed the civilization's rise to prominence. It was here that the Olmecs mastered the art of urban planning, with an uncanny knack for building cities that wouldn't fall apart after the first heavy rainfall. They were essentially the ancient world's version of civil engineers, minus the hard hats. And while the Olmecs were busy constructing their cities, they clearly had a penchant for carving colossal stone heads. Not just any heads, mind you, but heads with expressions so enigmatic they'd make even the Mona Lisa blush. These stone behemoths, some weighing as much as 20 tons, are scattered across the Olmec heartland and have baffled archaeologists for decades. Were they portraits of revered leaders, or perhaps ancient Mesoamerican soccer stars? We may never know, but they certainly make for excellent conversation pieces. Now, if you think hauling massive stones over treacherous terrain sounds like a logistical nightmare, you're not wrong. The Olmecs didn't have the luxury of wheels or beasts of burden to ease their labor. Instead, they likely relied on sheer manpower and possibly a few choice words of encouragement or exasperation to move these monoliths. It's a testament to both their ingenuity and their stubborn refusal to be outdone by a mere hunk of basalt. But it wasn't just about agriculture and oversized noggins. The Olmecs were also pioneers in creating a society that was as complex as it was stratified. At the top of their social hierarchy were the rulers, who were believed to be divinely sanctioned and possibly had the best seat at any given Olmec shindig. Below them were priests and shamans, the spiritual guides who probably doubled as the ancient equivalent of talk show hosts, dispensing wisdom and cosmic insights. The rest of the populace, comprising artisans, farmers, and laborers, were the backbone of Olmec society, ensuring that the wheels of civilization, metaphorical ones of course, kept turning smoothly. In terms of religion, the Olmecs were deeply invested in a cosmology that was as rich as their fertile lands. They worshipped a pantheon of deities, often depicted with an animalistic flair. Think jaguar guards with a side of serpentine charm. This blend of the spiritual and the natural world underscored their belief system, influencing their art, architecture, and daily lives. While the Olmecs were busy making cultural waves, they also laid the foundations for future Mesoamerican civilizations. Their influence seeped into the societal fabric of later cultures like the Maya and the Aztecs, who would borrow heavily from Olmec innovations and concepts. It's like the Olmecs were the trendsetters of their time, and everyone else was just trying to keep up. However, no discussion of the Olmecs will be complete without acknowledging the myths that have swirled around them. Some have painted them as the mysterious progenitors of all Mesoamerican culture, a romantic notion that's as alluring as it is oversimplified. In reality, the Olmecs were just one of many groups contributing to the rich tapestry of the region's history. They were, however, exceptionally good at leaving behind tantalizing clues for archaeologists to puzzle over, a sort of ancient breadcrumb trail leading us back to their world. So, as we peel back the layers of Olmec history, what emerges is a civilization that was as dynamic and innovative as the land they inhabited. They were the original architects of Mesoamerican culture, carving out a niche amidst the verdant chaos and laying the groundwork for the civilizations that would follow. And while they may have eventually faded from view, their legacy continues to loom large, much like those massive stone heads that still watch over the land they once called home. Speaking of legacies, let's dive into one of the Olmec's most notorious contributions to Mesoamerican culture, the Mesoamerican ball game. Now, I know what you're thinking: sports, fun, camaraderie. But hold onto your headband, because this was no friendly neighborhood pickup game. Picture this: an ancient game that's part soccer, part ritual, and all drama. Teams battled it out on a court, using only their hips to keep a hefty rubber ball in play. Forget shin guards. The Olmec version of this sport was more about avoiding a potential sacrifice than scoring goals. Winning was nice, but avoiding the high stakes of defeat was even better. This game might have been a bit of a blood sport, literally. We're talking about a civilization that believed in the cosmic balance of the universe, often achieved through some good old-fashioned bloodletting. The ball game was more than just physical prowess. It was a reenactment of the celestial struggle, a live-action cosmic drama with very real consequences. If you think getting benched is bad, imagine playing with your life on the line. Talk about pressure, right? Moving on from heart-pounding rituals to heart-stopping artistry, let's talk about those iconic colossal heads again. These aren't just oversized busts of ancient leaders with enviable jawlines. Weighing up to 20 tons, these stone heads are like the Olmec calling cards scattered across the landscape. Imagine the logistics of moving these gargantuan sculptures without the help of modern machinery. No cranes, no forklifts, just a lot of manpower and possibly some very creative profanity. The Olmecs likely used logs to roll these monoliths to their final destinations, proving that ingenuity isn't always about what you have, but how you use it. But why go to such lengths? Well, these heads are believed to represent rulers or important figures, capturing the power and prestige of the Olmec elite. Think of them as ancient publicity stunts, giant, immovable selfies etched in stone, broadcasting the might and influence of the civilization. And while their expressions remain tantalizingly enigmatic, they speak volumes about the Olmec's artistic skill and cultural priorities. Now, if you're thinking the Olmecs were all about grand gestures, let's take a moment to appreciate their subtler contributions, like the early writing systems they developed. Though not as well documented or as elaborate as later Mesoamerican scripts, these early symbols hint at a society that valued record-keeping and communication. Whether they were tracking maize production or documenting royal decrees, the Olmecs were laying the groundwork for future civilizations to build upon. They were the true pioneers of the ancient sticky note, ensuring that important messages didn't get lost in the shuffle. Of course, no discussion about Olmec culture would be complete without acknowledging their rich religious tapestry. Their pantheon was a veritable zoo of deities, each with its own animalistic twist. The word jaguar figure, a blend of human and feline features, stands out as a central icon in their mythos. These creatures weren't just the stuff of nightmares. They were potent symbols of power, transformation, and the connection between the earthly and the divine. Their influence rippled through later civilizations like the Maya and the Aztecs, who borrowed liberally from Olmec cosmology. And let's not overlook the practical side of all this religious fervor. The Olmec priesthood wielded considerable power, acting as intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their rituals and ceremonies weren't just spiritual exercises. They were crucial in maintaining societal order and cosmic harmony. In a world where divine favor was as important as crop yields, the priests were the ultimate power brokers, ensuring that the wheels of divine bureaucracy kept turning smoothly. So, what does all this tell us about the Olmecs? They were a civilization that excelled at balancing the spiritual with the practical, the monumental with the minute. Their achievements weren't just about what they created, but how they integrated those creations into the fabric of their society. From the reverberating echoes of the ball game courts to the silent, stone faces of their colossal heads, the Olmecs left a mark on Mesoamerican history that's as indelible as it is enigmatic. As we wrap up this segment of our journey through Olmec history, let's take a moment to appreciate the complexity of their world. They thrived in a land that was as challenging as it was fertile, navigating a landscape of dense forests and winding rivers. Their society was a tapestry woven with threads of agriculture, religion, art, and innovation. They set the stage for the civilizations that would follow, leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and confound. And yet, despite all we've uncovered, there's still so much more to explore about the Olmecs. How did their society ultimately decline, and what lessons can we learn from their rise and fall? Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries of this ancient civilization, one stone head at a time. But before we dive headlong into the Olmecs' economic endeavors, let's paint a picture of just how sophisticated their trade networks were. Imagine an ancient logistics operation so finely tuned, it would make your favorite online retail giant look like a kid running a lemonade stand. The Olmecs were Mesoamerica's original supply chain wizards, orchestrating a vast network that spanned hundreds of kilometers and connected regions like the Gulf Coast and the Valley of Mexico. And they did it all without the aid of spreadsheets or overnight shipping. Their trade routes were the ancient equivalent of highways, snaking through dense jungles and across rivers. These paths facilitated the exchange of goods that were as prized then as they are today. Let's talk cacao, chocolate's humble ancestor, and the Olmec's liquid gold. If you think your chocolate cravings are intense, try bartering for cacao beans in the sweltering heat of the Olmec heartland. Cacao wasn't just a treat, it was currency, status symbol, and spiritual offering rolled into one bitter, frothy drink. But the Olmecs weren't just in the business of chocolate. They had a penchant for rubber, a material that would go on to revolutionize societies far and wide. The Olmecs were among the first to figure out how to tap rubber trees and transform the sticky sap into something useful. Picture them as the ancient Michelin men, bouncing ideas around, literally. This rubber, essential for their infamous ball game and other practical uses, was a hot commodity, traded far and wide, and proving the Olmecs were no slouches in the economic innovation department. The Olmecs also dealt in jade and obsidian, materials that were the ancient world's equivalent of bling and blade. Jade, with its mesmerizing green hue, was a luxury item coveted for its beauty and symbolic power. Obsidian, meanwhile, was the sharp-edged choice for tools and weapons, making it both a practical and deadly trade good. These materials traveled far from their sources, highlighting just how expansive the Olmec trade routes really were. Now, let's dish out some numbers. Imagine coordinating the movement of goods over 500 kilometers, a distance that's a cakewalk today, but was a Herculean feat back then. And the Olmecs did it all without the benefit of wheels. That's right, no carts, no wagons, just sheer human determination, and possibly a few sore backs. They relied on river transport and an army of porters who shuffled goods along these ancient routes. It's like an ultra-marathon, but instead of a medal, you get the satisfaction of fueling a burgeoning civilization. Of course, these trade networks weren't just about exchanging goods. They were the veins through which cultural and technological innovations flowed, enabling the Olmecs to influence and be influenced by neighboring regions. It's a bit like a cultural exchange program, minus the awkward homestays and language barriers. The Olmecs were the trendsetters, and everyone else wanted in on their latest obsidian blade or jade amulet. But let's not romanticize this too much. While the Olmec trade network paints a picture of peaceful commerce, the reality was far more complex. Power dynamics and political intrigue were as much a part of their world as cacao and rubber. The Olmec civilization was a tapestry of alliances and rivalries, where the balance of power could shift as easily as a rubber ball bouncing across a court. Beneath the surface of their bustling trade economy lurked a world of political maneuvering and not-so-subtle power plays. Rulers and elites orchestrated these networks, not just to fill their coffers, but to consolidate power and influence. They were the puppet masters pulling the strings of trade, using it as a tool to maintain their grip on society. And when diplomacy failed, conflict wasn't far behind. After all, nothing spices up a political landscape quite like a little bit of tension, and maybe some bloodletting for good measure. The myth of the Olmecs as a peaceful, harmonious society is just that, a myth. While they were undoubtedly skilled diplomats and traders, they were also adept at the darker arts of political survival. The Olmecs were no strangers to war, evidenced by their fortified settlements and weapon caches. These weren't just precautionary measures. They were the reality of a world where power was never guaranteed, and enemies were often closer than friends. And so, we have a civilization that was as adept at navigating the treacherous waters of politics as they were at maneuvering goods along their trade routes. The Olmecs were masters of both commerce and conflict, proving that you could be a savvy businessman by day and a shrewd strategist by night. Their legacy is one of balance, where the scales of trade and power were constantly in motion, much like the rubber balls that defined their games, and sometimes their fate. As we peel back the layers of Olmec society, we see a civilization that was as dynamic as it was enigmatic. Their trade networks were a testament to their ingenuity, but they were also a reflection of the political currents that shaped their world. In the end, the Olmecs were a civilization that thrived on the edge of innovation and intrigue, leaving behind a legacy that's as complex and compelling as the history they helped create. But wait, there's more. Next time, we'll delve deeper into how these trade dynamics and political intrigues played out in the Olmec civilization's twilight years. From economic booms to the inevitable busts, we'll explore how this mighty civilization began to unravel. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the Olmecs, one cacao bean at a time. Now, let's talk about how the Olmec civilization started to unravel faster than a poorly wrapped burrito. By around 400 BCE, the Olmecs were facing some serious existential dilemmas, not unlike a midlife crisis, but with more tectonic shifts and fewer sports cars. What happened to this civilization that had previously managed to outsmart both the jungle and rival neighbors? Well, if you've ever tried to ignore a leaky roof, you'll know that environmental problems don't just go away. The Olmecs were no strangers to this kind of oversight. Archaeological evidence suggests that climate change played a significant role in their decline. Shifts in climate led to changes in rainfall patterns, which in turn affected agriculture. Imagine banking on corn for your next big meal, only to find your fields looking more like a desert than a dinner plate. Around this time, the Olmec heartland began to experience increased flooding and possibly droughts, a 1-2 punch that left their agrarian society gasping for breath. But wait, there's more. Mother Nature wasn't done with them yet. Volcanic eruptions might have also played a role in their downfall. The El Chichon volcano, located inconveniently close to the Olmec's backyard, is a prime suspect. It's like living in an idyllic neighborhood with a massive ticking time bomb in your backyard. When it blows, it's not just the lava you have to worry about, but the ash clouds that can suffocate crops and disrupt entire ecosystems. While concrete evidence of a catastrophic eruption around 400 BCE is still under debate, the potential for such natural disasters certainly loomed large. Now, you might think, how could they not see this coming? But let's be real. When you're busy mastering the art of colossal head carving, long-term planning sometimes takes a backseat. Plus, the Olmecs were already steeped in political and social complexities that made it hard to pivot on a dime. San Lorenzo, for example, had already been abandoned by 900 BCE, possibly due to river silting, which forced them to relocate to La Venta. Imagine uprooting an entire city because your river's got a silt problem, like moving house because your tap's acting up. Speaking of political intricacies, the Olmecs were not immune to the pitfalls of internal strife. Their society, ripe with power struggles and hierarchical tensions, was a powder keg waiting to go off. As the climate crises unfolded, the ruling class might have found it increasingly difficult to maintain control. With the guards seemingly out to lunch, the populace would have questioned their leader's divine mandate, leading to instability. It's a classic case of the emperor having no clothes. Only this time, the emperor's also got a soggy cornfield as a backdrop. Economic factors also played a role in this ancient drama. As the environment became less predictable, so did trade. The expansive trade networks that once brought wealth and clout were under threat from both natural and man-made disruptions. Picture trying to run a thriving marketplace when your main trading route is a flooded mess. The Olmec economy, reliant on the flow of goods like obsidian, jade, and cacao, would have struggled to keep pace, turning what was once a bustling trade hub into a ghost town. And let's not overlook the possibility of external pressures. The Olmecs weren't the only game in town. Other burgeoning powers were eyeing their territory like a hawk eyes a field mouse. The rise of other Mesoamerican civilizations, such as the Zapotec and Maya, could have added to their woes. These new kids on the block were eager to flex their muscles, and possibly saw the Olmec decline as an opportunity to expand their influence. It's the ancient equivalent of corporate raiding, but with spears and ceremonial knives. As we sift through the ashes, both literal and metaphorical, of the Olmec civilization, it becomes clear that their decline was not due to a single factor, but a perfect storm of challenges. It's a cautionary tale for the ages. Ignore the signs at your peril. Whether it was nature's fury, economic stagnation, or political turmoil, the Olmecs found themselves caught in a downward spiral from which they couldn't recover. Their colossal heads, once symbols of power and pride, became silent witnesses to a civilization's fall. Yet, even as the Olmecs teetered on the brink, they left behind a rich legacy. Their influence didn't vanish overnight. It lingered, woven into the fabric of later Mesoamerican cultures. From the Maya to the Aztec, the echoes of Olmec innovation and cosmology continued to reverberate, proving that while they may have lost the battle, they won a sort of cultural war. Their decline reminds us that even the mightiest civilizations are not immune to the forces of change, whether natural or human-made. So, as we pause to reflect on the mysterious decline of the Olmecs, we're left with a tapestry of lessons and legacies. Their story is a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between human ambition and the forces of nature, a balance that, when tipped, can lead to both downfall and enduring influence. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of this ancient civilization, one thing is clear. The Olmecs, with their complex society and enigmatic stone heads, have left us with more questions than answers, ensuring their place in the annals of history as one of Mesoamerica's most fascinating cultures. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the final chapter of the Olmec saga, where we'll explore how their legacy paved the way for future Mesoamerican civilizations. And so, as the Olmecs took their final bow and exited stage left, they left behind a cultural footprint that was anything but minor. Picture the Olmecs as the proverbial first domino in a Rube Goldberg machine of Mesoamerican history. Their innovations and ideas didn't just vanish into the jungle mist. They were picked up, polished, and paraded around by the civilizations that followed. You could say the Olmecs were the original influencers, setting trends that would echo through the ages. Move over, tick-tock stars. These guys were the real deal. Let's start with their art, which was anything but abstract. The Olmecs gave us colossal heads, those enigmatic stone behemoths that could double as lawn ornaments for giants. These heads weren't just oversized noggins for the sake of spectacle. They were statements of power, a legacy of leadership that later societies like the Maya and Aztecs would emulate in their own monumental sculptures. The Olmecs pioneered this grand art form, and it became an enduring symbol of authority and reverence. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a presidential portrait, only with more basalt and less Photoshop. But it wasn't all about the art. The Olmecs had a spiritual flair that made even the most elaborate modern rituals look like child's play. Their religion was a heady mix of animalistic deities and cosmic drama. The word jaguar, a fusion of man and beast, prowled through their mythology and found its way into later cultures. The Maya, for instance, took these religious motifs and ran with them like a kid who just discovered a secret stash of Halloween candy. The Olmec's pantheon of gods was like a prequel to the rich, complex cosmologies that would dominate Mesoamerican spirituality for centuries. And if you thought their religious influence was impressive, wait until you hear about their urban planning skills. The Olmecs were the original city slickers, mastering the art of urban development long before skyscrapers were a twinkle in anyone's eye. Their cities like San Lorenzo and La Venta weren't just haphazard collections of huts. They were meticulously planned urban centers with sophisticated drainage systems that would make even modern civil engineers nod in approval. This knack for city building was a template that the Maya and Aztecs would later follow, transforming their own cities into vibrant, bustling metropolises. Now, let's talk about the ballgame. You remember that ancient sport that was part soccer, part survival test? The Olmecs didn't just invent it, they turned it into a cultural phenomenon. This game was more than just a pastime. It was a religious and social cornerstone that became a staple for later civilizations. The Maya and Aztecs took up the mantle, turning the ball game into a ritualistic spectacle that captivated audiences and terrified participants. It's like the Olmecs gave the world its first extreme sport, complete with high stakes and higher drama. But perhaps the Olmecs' most profound legacy lies in their role as cultural connectors. They were the original cultural mashup artists, blending influences from various regions and weaving them into a tapestry that would be picked apart and reassembled by their successors. Their trade networks didn't just ferry goods, they transported ideas and innovations. This exchange of knowledge and culture laid the groundwork for the rich syncretism that would characterize Mesoamerican civilization. It's like they were running an ancient think tank, with concepts and customs flowing as freely as cacao beans. Of course, we can't ignore the Olmec's darker side. Their society wasn't all sunshine and rubber balls. The political intrigue and social stratification that marked their civilization were lessons that later cultures would also learn, and sometimes painfully. The Aztecs, for example, perfected the art of political maneuvering, using alliances and rivalries to their advantage. It's a stark reminder that while the Olmecs were masters of innovation, they were also no strangers to the complexities of power and governance. So, what's the takeaway from this ancient saga? The Olmecs were a civilization that thrived on the edge of innovation and intrigue. They were trailblazers, laying down a cultural roadmap that would guide future empires. Their decline was a cautionary tale about the fragility of human ambition in the face of natural and political forces. Yet, their legacy is a testament to the enduring power of creativity and adaptability. As we wrap up our journey through the Olmec world, let's not forget the lessons they left us. In a world where civilizations rise and fall with the tides of time, the Olmecs remind us that even the mightiest can crumble. Yet, their ideas and innovations continue to resonate, proving that while they may have disappeared from the physical world, their influence lingers on. It's a legacy carved not just in stone, but in the very fabric of Mesoamerican history. A reminder that true greatness is measured not by how you fall, but by the echoes you leave behind. And there you have it, the Olmecs, the original Mesoamerican maestros who set the stage for everything that followed. They were the giants whose shoulders the Maya and Aztecs stood on, even as their own civilization faded into the annals of history. So next time you marvel at a towering temple or ponder the mysteries of ancient art, give a nod to the Olmecs. They may have vanished from the jungles, but their spirit still dances through the ruins, whispering tales of a time when stone heads ruled the land and rubber balls dictated fate.